My son surprised me with a trip to London, just me. He said, "You deserve this, Mom." As I was about to get into the taxi, the housekeeper who had worked for my family for years ran over, grabbed my hand, and whispered, trembling, "Please don't go. Trust me." I didn't understand, but something in her eyes made my heart turn cold. I pretended to leave, then slipped into the guest house and hid. An hour later, a black van with no license plates pulled up outside. When the man stepped out, my heart stopped at the sight. And in that moment, I realized this had all been planned for a long time. Thank you for being here with me. If this moment caught your attention, take a second to comment. Where you're watching from, I'd love to connect. Stories like this may not always be real, but they often reflect situations worth thinking about. Some details are adapted for storytelling, yet the message may still offer something meaningful to consider. My son surprised me with a trip to London. Just me. No family. "You deserve this, Mom," he said that December morning, standing in the driveway of the home I'd lived in for 28 years. I should have felt grateful, excited even. Instead, something cold settled in my chest, a whisper I couldn't name yet. It was December 15th, a Sunday, and the Arizona winter sun hung pale and distant over the red-tiled roofs of Paradise Valley. The air smelled like creosote and dust, that particular Scottsdale scent I'd grown to love since moving here from Ohio decades ago. Back then, I'd been a young widow with a 5-year-old son and a heart full of desperate hope. Now I was 68, my hair more silver than brown, my hands marked by the years I'd spent building a life for the two of us. David stood beside the taxi, his hands in the pockets of his tailored slacks, his smile wide and easy. 40 years old, handsome in that effortless way his father had been successful in his insurance career. My son, my only child, the boy I'd raised alone after his father passed in a car accident when David was barely old enough to remember him. "A whole week in London," David said, reaching for my suitcase. "You raised me by yourself, Mom. You gave up your career, sold your house back in Ohio, paid for my college, helped me start my business. You deserve to see the world." The words sounded right. They should have warmed me. But there was something in his eyes, a flicker quick as a hummingbird that I couldn't quite read. "You'll join me in 2 days?" I asked, adjusting the strap of my purse. "Absolutely. I just need to finish some paperwork here. Business stuff, boring contracts. I'll fly out Tuesday night, meet you at the hotel Wednesday morning." He leaned down and kissed my forehead the way he used to when he was small and thought I could fix anything. "Go, enjoy, you've earned it." The taxi driver, a quiet man with sun-weathered skin, opened the back door. I turned toward the house one last time, the Spanish colonial I'd bought with the life insurance money from Roberts, passing the home where David had grown from a grieving boy into a man. Cream stucco walls, red clay tiles, a circular driveway lined with desert landscaping, saguaro palo verde purple sage. Beyond the main house sat the casita, the little guest house I'd added 10 years ago tucked beside the garden wall. That's when Diane appeared. She came out of the side entrance near the kitchen, moving faster than I'd seen her move in years. Diane Collins. 52 years old, sturdy and steady, with gray-streaked hair always pulled back in a practical bun. She'd been my housekeeper for 12 years. 12 years of quiet mornings, shared tea conversations about her daughter Emma and my book club, and the small rhythms of daily life. In 12 years, Diane had never once questioned me. Now her face was pale, her hands were shaking. "Mrs. Wright." She called, her voice thin and urgent. "Mrs. Wright, please wait." David's expression tightened. Just for a second. Then the smile returned. "Diane, we're running late for the flight." But Diane wasn't looking at him. She was looking at me, and her eyes, those steady, reliable eyes, were full of something I'd never seen before. Fear. She reached me in 3 quick steps, her fingers closing around my wrist. Her grip was cold, trembling. "Please don't go," she whispered. "Just trust me. Don't get in that taxi." The world seemed to narrow. The distant hum of traffic on Lincoln Drive faded. The warmth of the sun felt suddenly thin. "Diane," I whispered back, "what's wrong?" "Mrs. Wright, Her voice broke. She glanced at David, then back at me. "Please, just don't go." David stepped forward, his tone gentle but firm. "Diane, Mom's flight leaves at 2. If there's a problem with something in the house, we can talk about it when I get back. But Diane didn't let go of my wrist. And in that moment, standing in the driveway of my own home, I made a choice I didn't fully understand. I trusted her. "You know what?" I said, pulling my hand free and turning to the taxi driver. "I'm so sorry. I think I left something inside. Just give me 5 minutes." David's jaw tightened. "Mom, the flight." "5 minutes, sweetheart. I'll be right back." I grabbed my suitcase from David's hand and walked toward the front door, Diane close behind me. I could feel my son's eyes on my back, could hear the faint rustle of his frustration, but I didn't turn around. Inside the house was cool and dim the way I liked it. Saltillo tile floors, wooden beams across the ceiling, family photos lining the hallway, David's college graduation, his wedding to Jessica 3 years ago, Robert's face frozen in a frame from 1984. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice low. Diane's hands were still shaking. "I can't explain now, but please, Mrs. Wright, don't get in that taxi. Don't go to the airport." "Diane, you're scaring me." "Good," she said, her eyes wet. "You should be scared." A car door slammed outside. The taxi was leaving. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Go to the casita," Diane whispered. "Hide. I'll come to you in an hour. I'll explain everything. But right now you need to disappear." It was insane. It was irrational. But something in her voice, something raw and true, made me believe her. So I did. I slipped out the back door, crossed the small courtyard where the fountain burbled quietly, and ducked into the casita. The little guest house was dim and cool, smelling faintly of lavender from the sachets I kept in the linen closet. I locked the door behind me and moved to the window that faced the circular driveway. From there, I could see David standing alone. The taxi was gone. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then glanced at the house. His expression was calm, too calm. After a moment, he walked back inside. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my pulse still racing, my mind spinning. What had I just done? What was Diane so afraid of? The minutes crawled by, 15, 30, 45. And then just past 1 o'clock, I heard it. An engine, low and rumbling, growing louder as it turned into the driveway. I moved back to the window, careful to stay hidden behind the curtain. A black van rolled to a stop in front of the house. Not a delivery truck, not a neighbor. A cargo van, windowless and dark with no company logo on the side. My chest tightened. 2 men stepped out. One I didn't recognize, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing coveralls. The other, my heart stopped when I saw Kenneth Brooks stepping out of the passenger side, his hand already reaching back to help the driver. I knew that face. 40 years old, maybe 41. Receding hairline, sharp jawline, the build of someone who used to play college sports, but had softened around the middle. Kenneth Brooks. David's friend from Arizona State, the one who'd been best man at David's wedding 3 years ago. The one who'd lost his finance job in Phoenix 2 years back and had been between opportunities ever since. What was he doing here? And why was he arriving in an unmarked black van on the same day I was supposed to be flying to London? My breath caught not in my throat, but somewhere deeper in that space between my ribs where dread lives. The driver climbed out next, younger, maybe 30, wearing navy coveralls with no name patch, no company logo, just a plain uniform and work boots scuffed at the toes. He moved to the back of the van and opened the rear doors with a metallic clang that echoed across the quiet street. I pressed myself closer to the window, careful to stay hidden behind the casita's lace curtain. My fingers gripped the windowsill, the painted wood smooth and cool beneath my palms. Kenneth and the stranger began unloading equipment. First came the boxes, large white cardboard boxes with black lettering printed on the sides. Even from 30 feet away, I could read the words, Desert Haven Behavioral Health. My stomach dropped. I'd never heard of Desert Haven, never seen that name on any medical paperwork, never discussed it with David or anyone else. But something about those words, behavioral health, sent ice crawling down my spine. The men set the boxes on the driveway, then returned to the van. This time they pulled out a wheelchair, not the temporary kind you see at airports, lightweight and collapsible. This one was heavy-duty industrial with thick arm restraints and a chest strap hanging loose from the back. Restraints. My mind stuttered over the word, refusing to process what I was seeing. Then came the clipboard. Medical forms by the look of them. Kenneth tucked it under his arm like a delivery manifest, casual as someone dropping off a package. The front door of my house opened. David stepped out into the sunlight, his expression calm and focused. He'd changed his shirt, no longer the casual button-down he'd worn when I'd left in the taxi, but something more formal. A pale blue dress shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows. Professional, prepared. He walked down the stone pathway to the driveway, and Kenneth turned to greet him with a wide grin. Dave. Kenneth said, his voice carrying easily across the still December air. They clasped hands, not a polite shake, but a firm, familiar grip. The kind of handshake that said, "We're in this together." "Right on time," David replied, glancing at his watch, the same silver Rolex I'd given him for his 35th birthday. "She should be at the airport by now." She. Not Mom, not my mother, just she. Like I was cargo, a problem to be handled. Kenneth chuckled a low, easy sound. "Flight leaves at 2 right. 2:05, Sky Harbor to Heathrow." David confirmed. He pulled his phone from his pocket, checked the screen, then slipped it back. "By the time anyone realizes she never boarded, we'll have everything in place. Clean and simple. Clean and simple." The words landed like stones in water, rippling outward, spreading cold through every part of me. The man in coveralls, still nameless, still silent, wheeled the chair toward the front door. Kenneth picked up the clipboard and one of the boxes. David held the door open, ushering them inside like welcomed guests. "She in there?" Kenneth asked, nodding toward the house. David's smile didn't waver. "Should be halfway through security by now. Diane said she left 20 minutes ago." Diane said. My chest tightened. Had Diane told him I'd left, or had she lied to protect me? I thought back to the moment in the driveway, the way she'd grabbed my wrist, the terror in her eyes. "Don't go," she'd whispered. "Trust me." And I had. I'd trusted her enough to hide. But David thought I was gone. He thought I was walking through the airport boarding pass in hand, oblivious to what was waiting for me here. No, not waiting for me here. Waiting for me when I came back. The realization settled over me like a weight pressing down on my lungs. They weren't here to take me away today. They were here to prepare, to set up whatever hell they'd planned for when I returned from a trip I was never supposed to take. Kenneth glanced around the empty driveway, the quiet street, the neighbor's house across the way with its shades drawn. "How long until she's back?" "Week from Tuesday," David said. "Gives us 10 days to finalize everything with Daniels and get the transfer paperwork signed." Daniels, another name I didn't recognize. "And the deposit cleared?" Kenneth asked. David nodded. $75,000 wired it Thursday. Desert Haven confirmed receipt yesterday. $75,000. I'd raised this man. I'd worked 2 jobs to keep him fed and clothed after his father died. I'd sold the house I'd loved in Ohio to move to Arizona for better opportunities. I'd paid for his college. His master's degree helped him with the down payment on his first house. I'd given him everything I had. And now he was spending $75,000 on what a behavioral health facility. For me, she's gonna fight it. Kenneth said, his tone almost amused. "You know that, right?" David's expression didn't change. "She's already showing signs. Confusion memory lapses the episode at the restaurant last week. Daniels has 6 months of documentation. By the time we file the papers, no judge in Maricopa County will question it. Episode at the restaurant." I thought back to 2 weeks ago, December 3rd, dinner at the Mission in Old Town. I'd felt dizzy, disoriented. David had taken me to the ER. They'd said it was nothing, maybe dehydration, maybe a mild reaction to something I'd eaten. But it hadn't been nothing. It had been the beginning. The man in coveralls emerged from the house empty-handed now and returned to the van for another load. This time he pulled out a small black duffel bag, unzipped it briefly to check the contents, then slung it over his shoulder. I couldn't see what was inside, but I didn't need to. Whatever they were bringing into my home, it wasn't meant to help me. Kenneth clapped David on the shoulder. "You're doing the right thing, man. I know it's hard, but sometimes you gotta make the tough calls." David's jaw tightened, just for a second. Then he nodded. "She's my mother. I'm not going to let her hurt herself, or anyone else. Hurt herself, or anyone else." The lie was so smooth, so practiced, I almost believed it myself. They disappeared inside the front door, closing behind them with a soft, final click. I stood frozen at the casita window, my legs numb, my mind racing through fragments of memory, trying to piece together when this had started. The vitamins David had been giving me every morning for months. Brain health, he'd said. The doctor's appointments I didn't remember scheduling. The moments of confusion I'd dismissed as age, as stress, as nothing. It hadn't been nothing. It had been him. A knock sounded at the casita door, soft, urgent, 3 quick taps. I spun around, my heart hammering, now adrenaline flooding my veins. The door opened a crack and Diane slipped inside, closing it quickly behind her. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed, her hands still trembling the way they'd been an hour ago in the driveway. She looked at me and I saw the weight of what she knew written across every line of her face. "Mrs. Wright," she whispered, her voice breaking. "There's something you need to know, and we don't have much time." Diane closed the casita door and locked it. Her face was streaked with tears, silent tears that carved tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "Sit down, Mrs. Wright," she whispered. I sank onto the small sofa. Diane pulled over the wooden chair and sat close, our knees almost touching. In 12 years, we'd never sat this close. The invisible line between employer and employee had always been there. Now it was gone. 2 nights ago, Thursday, I was cleaning upstairs, she began. David was in his office on the phone. I heard your name and She stopped pressing her palm against her mouth. Then she pulled out her phone and opened the voice memo app. I recorded the last 2 minutes. She pressed play. David's voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. Daniels confirmed the final report yesterday. Progressive dementia danger to herself and others. 6 months of documentation. No judge is going to question it. A pause. Yes, 75 up front, 12 per month after. Kenneth's handling transport. We'll have her placed by Monday, paperwork filed by Wednesday. Another pause. Jessica's right. 6 months, maybe a year, and it'll be over. Natural decline completely expected. Then we're clear, the inheritance, the insurance, everything. My mind went blank, not empty, but white like a photograph overexposed to light. Diane stopped the recording. I should have told you immediately, but I thought maybe I'd misunderstood. But this morning, when David mentioned London, I knew. The pills, I heard myself say. The vitamins. Diane nodded. Since June. I saw the bottle last month when I was cleaning his bathroom. The label didn't match the tablets inside. I looked up the markings online. They're sedatives, Mrs. Wright, mixed with something that affects memory and cognition. I found research printouts in his desk. 6 months of use causes symptoms that mimic dementia. 6 months, June through December, every morning, David bringing me water and 2 white pills. For your brain health, Mom. Preventative care. My mother had died from Alzheimer's. I'd watched her fade, watched her forget my name. I'd been terrified of that same fate, and David had used that fear to poison me. Dr. Daniels, I whispered. Who is he? Philip Daniels, 45 psychiatrist in North Scottsdale. Diane pulled out a folded printout. He's been investigated twice by the medical board, but nothing was proven. David's been taking you to see him every month since June. I tried to remember. There had been appointments, doctor's visits David insisted on. Bland waiting rooms, forms I barely recalled filling out. I thought they were physicals, I said. Psychiatric evaluations, Diane said gently. Dr. Daniels wrote reports after everyone. She unfolded the paper. This is from November 28th. Patient exhibits marked memory loss, spatial disorientation, difficulty with executive function. Recommend memory care facility. The words blurred. Desert Haven. I managed. The boxes. A private behavioral health facility 2 hours north near Sedona. It's not a hospital, Mrs. Wright. It's long-term care for severe cognitive issues, the kind of place where patients don't leave. Don't leave. Nausea rose in my throat. The deposit was $75,000. Diane continued, her voice breaking. David wired it Thursday, December 12th. 3 days ago. Monthly cost after that is $12,000. $12,000 a month. I'd been an accountant before I became a mother. Even through shock, the math assembled itself. $12,000 monthly, $144,000 yearly. How long before it became easier, more profitable to let me waste away? There's more, Diane said softly. A life insurance policy. $1.5 million. David's the beneficiary. Purchased June last year, 18 months ago. 18 months. This wasn't sudden. This had been planned, calculated, set in motion long before I'd had reason to suspect. And your inheritance, Diane added almost apologetically. From Mr. Wright's estate, $2.8 million held in trust. David becomes executor once you're deemed incapable of managing your affairs. $2.8 million plus $1.5 million, $4.3 million. The price my son had decided I was worth. On the recording, I said slowly, David mentioned Jessica. Diane's expression darkened. I think she planned this. I've heard them arguing late at night. Jessica pushes him, tells him he's weak, tells him he deserves the money after everything you took from him. I don't think David would have done this alone. But with her, Jessica, my daughter-in-law, the woman who'd smiled at me across Thanksgiving dinner 3 weeks ago, who'd called me Mom and thanked me for the earrings I'd given her. The woman who'd said 6 months, maybe a year, and it'll be over. I looked down at my hands, 68 years old, marked with age spots, but still mine. Still capable. Still strong enough to fight. Why didn't you call the police? I asked. Diane's face crumpled. They have 6 months of medical records, Mrs. Wright. Reports from a licensed psychiatrist saying you're declining, confused, dangerous. If I'd called police and said your son was trying to commit you unlawfully, they'd look at those records and think I was confused. Or worse, that I was taking advantage of you, isolating you from family. She was right. I hated it, but she was right. David had built a paper fortress around me, and anyone looking from outside would see what he wanted: a loving son caring for his ailing mother and an overstepping housekeeper. Then what do we do? I asked. Diane looked at me with something I hadn't expected: hope. We gather proof, she said. Real proof. Something they can't explain away. I thought of the black van outside the wheelchair with restraints, the boxes labeled Desert Haven. I thought of David's smooth lies, his voice on the recording, calm, assured, calculating. I thought of my son, and I felt something inside me shift, not breaking, hardening. Then that's what we'll do, I said quietly. We'll gather proof, and we'll make sure everyone knows the truth. Diane reached across and took my hand. Her fingers were warm, solid, real. You've been like a mother to me, Mrs. Wright, she whispered. I won't let them do this to you. I squeezed her hand. For the first time since hiding in the casita, I felt something other than fear. I felt ready. As Diane and I sat in the casita that December afternoon, her hand still warm in mine, my mind dragged me back to 12 days earlier, the first time I'd felt something was wrong. December 3rd, a Tuesday evening. David had called that morning, insisting on taking me to dinner to celebrate my upcoming London trip. Just the three of us, Mom. Something special before you leave. The mission. Old Town Scottsdale. Exposed brick walls, Edison bulbs hanging from the ceiling, the scent of roasted chilies filling the air. David had reserved a corner table, private and quiet. Jessica arrived first, sliding into the booth across from me. She wore a cream silk blouse, diamond studs glinting in her ears, the ones I'd given her last Christmas. She leaned across and kissed my cheek. Eleanor, you look wonderful. Are you excited about London? I am, I'd said, still feeling that flutter of unease I couldn't name, though I wish David were coming from the start. He'll be there before you know it, Jessica assured me. David arrived moments later, apologizing for traffic. He ordered wine, something Spanish I didn't recognize, and the server poured 3 glasses. I took a sip, then reached for my water instead. I'd never been much of a drinker. The water glass was tall, clear, beaded with condensation. Jessica had been the one to pass it to me when the server set it down. I remember that now, though I hadn't thought anything of it then. I drank half the glass. We ordered food. The conversation flowed easily. London Book Club, Jessica's work. Normal, comfortable, safe. And then, maybe 20 minutes after we'd ordered, the room tilted. Not violently, just a slow, sickening shift like the floor had become a boat deck. I blinked, but the Edison bulbs stretched into golden streaks. Mom, David's voice sounded distant, muffled. You okay? I opened my mouth, but my tongue felt thick. The words tangled. I'm just dizzy. Jessica's face swam into focus, her expression concerned. Eleanor, you're pale. Do you feel sick? I shook my head, or tried to. Everything blurred at the edges. My fingers gripped the table, but even that felt distant. "Mom, talk to me." David was standing now, his hand on my shoulder. "What's wrong?" "I don't know." The words slurred together. My vision narrowed to a tunnel. "I'm calling 911, David said. The next 30 minutes came in fragments. The manager hovering, Jessica holding my hand telling me to breathe, sirens, paramedics in Navy uniforms crouching beside the booth, shining a penlight in my eyes. "Can you tell me what day it is, ma'am?" I couldn't. Not then. The words scattered. They loaded me onto a stretcher. David climbed into the ambulance. Jessica followed in her car. The ER at Scottsdale Osborne was bright and cold. White walls, antiseptic smells. They wheeled me into a bay, hooked me to machines that beeped. A nurse took my blood pressure, another drew blood. And then Dr. Daniels walked in. I didn't know his name then. He was just the doctor on call, middle-aged and professional in his white coat. He introduced himself, shook David's hand, then turned to me with a reassuring smile. "Mrs. Wright, I'm Dr. Philip Daniels. Can you tell me what happened tonight?" "And Dami Diwantar." By then the fog had started to lift. "I was at dinner. I felt dizzy. I couldn't speak properly." He nodded, checking my pupils with a penlight. "Any history of stroke, high blood pressure?" "No, nothing." He asked more questions. David answered some for me, his voice concerned, mentioning my age, mentioning I'd been tired recently. Dr. Daniels ordered tests. CT scan, blood work, EKG. I spent 2 hours drifting in exhaustion while machines whirred. Finally, near midnight, he returned with a clipboard. "The good news is we don't see evidence of a stroke. Your scans are clear. But given your symptoms, sudden confusion, speech difficulty, I'm concerned this might have been a transient ischemic attack. A TIA, sometimes called a mini-stroke." My stomach dropped. "A stroke?" "A transient one. It means blood flow to your brain was briefly reduced, but there's no permanent damage. However, TIAs can be warning signs. I'd like to see you for a follow-up in my office next week for cognitive assessments." "Cognitive assessments," David nodded immediately. "Of course, whatever she needs." Dr. Daniels handed David a form. "In the meantime, Mrs. Wright, rest. Avoid stress. If you experience more episodes, confusion, dizziness, come back immediately." They discharged me after midnight. David drove me home, helped me into bed. Jessica had already left, he said. I slept for 10 hours. When I woke, I felt normal, clear-headed. I convinced myself it had been nothing stress exhaustion, something I'd eaten. David called that afternoon. "How are you feeling, Mom?" "Better. I think I just overdid it." "Well, Dr. Daniels wants to see you next week, just to be safe." I'd gone to that appointment, and the next one, and the one after. Every month for 6 months, Dr. Daniels asked questions, gave memory tests, wrote notes. Every month I'd thought I was being responsible, taking care of my health. I hadn't known I was building my own cage. Sitting in the casita now, Diane's hand still in mine, I saw the truth. Jessica had slipped something into my water. She'd passed me the glass herself. The timing had been perfect 20 minutes after I drank just long enough for the sedative to take effect, while we were still at the restaurant with witnesses. David's 911 call hadn't been panic. It had been performance. Dr. Daniels hadn't been a concerned physician. He'd been waiting already briefed, ready to write the exact diagnosis they needed. Cognitive episode possible, TIA, recommend follow-up. That first medical record from December 3rd had been the foundation. The opening move in a 6-month game to erase me. I'd thought it was a health scare. It was the opening move in their game. The second memory surfaced like a drowning gasp 5 days after the restaurant. December 8th, a Sunday morning. The house had been quiet, winter sunlight streaming through the living room windows, casting long, golden rectangles across the saltillo tile. I'd been sitting in my reading chair searching for my glasses. I'd set them down somewhere, the side table maybe, or the kitchen counter, but I couldn't remember where. It was the kind of small forgetfulness that happens to everyone. Keys misplaced, a name temporarily lost, nothing unusual for anyone my age. But Jessica had noticed. She'd come downstairs around 9, her hair still damp from the shower, wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater. David was out. I remember something about Aaron's groceries, maybe. Just the two of us in the house. "Morning, Eleanor," she'd said, moving past me toward the kitchen. "Coffee, please." And have you seen my reading glasses? I could have sworn I left them right here. She'd paused, turned back with a small frown. Your glasses? No, I haven't seen them. When did you last have them? Last night. I was reading before bed. I stood checking the cushions of the bookshelf nearby. They have to be here somewhere. Jessica walked over, her expression shifting to something I couldn't quite read. Concern, maybe, or something sharper. Eleanor, this is the third time this week you've misplaced something. Heat flushed my face. It's not a big deal. I'm just distracted with the London trip coming up. Is it just distraction? She tilted her head slightly, her voice soft but pointed. Because last week you forgot where you parked at Whole Foods, and 2 days ago you called me Jennifer. I did not. But even as I said it, doubt crept in. Had I? The days had been blurring together lately, exhaustion making everything feel slightly off-kilter. You did, Jessica said gently. David and I have been worried about you. There's nothing to worry about. I said more sharply than I'd intended. I'm fine, I just need my glasses. Maybe we should talk to Dr. Daniels about this. About the memory issues. They're not issues, I snapped. I'm 68 years old, Jessica. Sometimes I forget where I put my glasses. That's normal. Her expression shifted again, something flickering behind her eyes. You're getting defensive because you're treating me like I stopped myself, frustration building in my chest. I'm not losing my mind. I didn't say you were. But her tone said otherwise. Calm, measured. The way you'd speak to someone who needed careful handling. And suddenly I felt it, that same fog from the restaurant, but different. Not physical this time, emotional. Like the ground was shifting beneath me and I couldn't find solid footing. Eleanor, Jessica said, stepping closer. You're confused, you're scared. We understand that, but you need to let us help you. I don't need help. The words came out louder than I'd meant, echoing in the quiet house. Jessica's eyes widened slightly. Eleanor, calm down. Don't tell me to calm down. Shame burned in my chest, now hot and acidic. Shame that maybe she was right, that maybe something was wrong with me, that maybe the restaurant incident hadn't been nothing after all. Jessica reached for my arm, her hand closing around my wrist. Eleanor, listen to me. And I pulled away, jerked my arm back hard. She stumbled backward, her hip catching the edge of the coffee table. For a moment she stood there, eyes wide, mouth open. Then she let herself fall slowly, almost gracefully onto the floor, her hand flying to her side. Eleanor! She gasped, her voice sharp with shock, or performance. I couldn't tell which. I stared at her, my hand still raised, trembling now. I didn't mean to. You pushed me. She scrambled backward across the floor, putting distance between us, her face pale. You actually pushed me. You grabbed me first. But she wasn't listening. She was pulling her phone from her pocket, her fingers shaking or pretending to shake as she dialed. Yes, I need police, she said, her voice breathless. My mother-in-law just attacked me. She's been having cognitive issues and she just became confrontational. I think she's dangerous. Dangerous. The word hung in the air like smoke. Jessica, that's not... I stepped toward her, but she flinched away, holding up one hand. Please stay back, Eleanor. I don't want to get hurt again. Humiliation washed over me, cold and suffocating. This couldn't be happening. I hadn't attacked her. I'd pulled away from her grip and she'd fallen or she'd thrown herself down. I couldn't even tell anymore. The police arrived within 10 minutes. 2 officers. The first was older, stocky with a gray mustache. The second was younger, lean and fit, maybe in his early 40s. He introduced himself as Officer Robert Pierce, his voice calm and professional, his eyes moving between Jessica and me with practiced assessment. Jessica was sitting on the couch now, composed, despite her earlier panic. She'd rolled up her sleeve to show a small bruise on her upper arm, purple-blue, about the size of a quarter. When had that appeared, I hadn't grabbed her arm. I'd pulled my own away. Had she done that to herself before this morning, earlier this week? Ma'am, can you tell me what happened? Officer Pierce asked her, pulling a small notepad from his belt. Jessica's voice was steady, reasonable. My mother-in-law has been experiencing cognitive decline over the past few months. Memory loss, confusion, disorientation. We've been trying to help her, but this morning she became upset about misplacing her glasses. She accused me of hiding them, and when I tried to calm her down, she grabbed my arm and pushed me. I fell against the coffee table. "I didn't grab her," I said, my voice shaking. "She grabbed me, I pulled away, and she fell. I didn't push her." Officer Pierce turned to me. "Mrs. Wright, have you been diagnosed with any cognitive conditions?" "No, I stopped. Dr. Daniels, the TIA, the follow-up appointments. I had an episode at a restaurant last week. They thought it might be a mini-stroke, but I'm fine now." "An episode?" the officer repeated, writing something down. "It was nothing, just dizziness." Jessica's voice soft and pained. "She also forgot where her car was last week, and she called me by the wrong name 2 days ago. That's not—" But even as I said it, I couldn't remember if it was true or not. The exhaustion, the fog, the pills David had been giving me every morning, brain health vitamins, they'd made everything hazy. The front door opened. David walked in carrying grocery bags, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm as he saw the police. "What's going on?" Officer Pierce introduced himself. "Sir, we're responding to a domestic disturbance call. Your wife says your mother pushed her." David set the bags down slowly, his eyes moving to Jessica, the bruise on her arm, her careful wounded posture, then to me. "Mom, what happened?" She grabbed my wrist. I said, my voice breaking now. "I just pulled away. I didn't push her." David's face was unreadable. Then he turned to the officer. "My mother's been having some confusion lately, memory issues. We've been worried about her, but we didn't think she'd become physical. Not defensive, not scared. Physical, like I was the threat." Officer Pierce made more notes. The older officer asked Jessica if she wanted medical attention. She declined, said the bruise wasn't serious, but she wanted it documented. They didn't arrest me. Officer Pierce explained that because there was no significant injury and Jessica didn't want to press charges, they'd simply file a report. But he also suggested gently professionally that my family might want to consider additional support for me. Additional support. Code for this woman is dangerous. After the police left, David stayed for another hour. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He just looked at me with this terrible, pitying sadness and said, "Mom, we're trying to help you, but you have to let us." I'd felt so ashamed, so confused, so certain I was losing my grip on reality. I'd apologized to Jessica. She'd accepted with grace, with understanding, with the perfect performance of a concerned daughter-in-law. And 5 days later, they'd tried to ship me off to London and then to Desert Haven. Sitting in the casita now, the afternoon sun slanting through the window, I understood. The glasses hadn't been misplaced. Jessica had hidden them. The forgetfulness she'd mentioned, some real, some invented, all weaponized. The grab, the fall, the bruise staged. The police report another brick in the fortress they were building around me. They'd turned my own fear and confusion into a weapon against me. But the worst attack haunted me most just 3 days before the London trip, December 12th, a Thursday. I'd spent the afternoon at Beverly Thompson's house 4 blocks away, the monthly meeting of our book club. 6 women all around my age, all living in North Scottsdale, all navigating the strange terrain of late 60s and early 70s with varying degrees of grace. We'd discussed a novel I can't even remember, now something about family secrets, ironically. And I'd stayed afterward for tea and conversation with Beverly, my closest friend in the group. By the time I left, the sun was sinking low over the McDowell Mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. December in Arizona. Cool air, dry and clean, the smell of desert sage drifting from the landscaped yards. I'd walked those 4 blocks 100 times. Quiet streets lined with desert willows and Palo Verde trees. Adobe walls surrounding estate homes. The occasional car passing slowly, residents heading home after work. Safe, familiar, mine. It was 5:30 when I turned onto my street. The light was fading to that soft purple dusk, street lamps beginning to flicker on. I'd pulled my cardigan tighter around my shoulders and was thinking about dinner, maybe soup, something warm, when I heard the engine. Low, powerful, accelerating. I turned. A black SUV was speeding toward me down the residential street. not slowing for the curve, not braking for the stop sign at the corner, coming straight at me. For a split second, I thought the driver hadn't seen me, that they'd lost control somehow, that it was an accident. Then the vehicle swerved not away from the sidewalk but onto it. Terror jolted through me, pure and electric. I threw myself sideways into the hedge that bordered the neighbor's yard, thorny branches tearing at my clothes and skin. The SUV's front bumper clipped my hip as I fell, spinning me around, and I hit the ground hard on my hands and knees. Pain exploded through my right side, sharp and consuming. The SUV's tires screeched as it jerked back onto the road, engine roaring as it accelerated away. I caught a glimpse of the rear plate, partial blurred by tears and shock, but enough to register the first two characters, 7J. Then it was gone, taillights disappearing around the corner. I lay there in the hedge, gasping, my vision swimming with white spots. My hip throbbed. My palms burned where they'd scraped across the concrete. Somewhere nearby, a dog was barking, frantic and high-pitched. Eleanor. I heard footsteps running, then a man's voice, familiar, urgent. Eleanor, my God, are you hurt? Hands gripped my shoulders, gentle but firm, helping me sit up. I blinked through the pain and saw Mr. Harrison crouching beside me. 75 years old, my neighbor, 3 houses down. Retired engineer widower, the man who always waved when he saw me gardening. My voice came out shaky. I'm okay, I think. Don't move yet. His face was pale, eyes wide behind wire-rimmed glasses. That car, I saw the whole thing from my driveway. Eleanor, that wasn't an accident. What? That car aimed for you. His hands were steady as he checked my arms, my shoulders, looking for serious injury. I watched it swerve onto the sidewalk. Deliberately. My mind stuttered over the word, deliberately. No, maybe they were distracted on their phone. Eleanor. Mr. Harrison's voice was firm. I've been an engineer for 40 years. I know the difference between loss of control and intentional trajectory. That driver saw you and aimed. The world tilted, not from the pills this time, but from the weight of what he was saying. Someone had just tried to end my life. Did you see the driver? I whispered. No, tinted windows, but I got the full plate number. He pulled his phone from his pocket, and my dash cam caught the whole thing. I've been meaning to upgrade it, but the old one still records when it detects motion in the driveway. It got a clear shot of the vehicle. I stared at him, trying to process. A witness, evidence, proof. We need to call the police, he said, already starting to dial. No. The word burst out of me sharp and panicked. Mr. Harrison's hand froze. I should call my son first. He'll know what to do. Mr. Harrison's expression shifted, confusion, maybe concern. Eleanor, someone just tried to run you down. We need to report this. I will. My hands were shaking now, adrenaline finally catching up. Please, let me call David first. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. All right, but I'm not deleting that footage. And if you don't report this, I will. I called David. He answered on the second ring. Mom, everything okay? My voice broke. I was walking home from Beverly's and a car almost hit me. I'm okay, but I'm shaken. Can you come get me? Silence. Then, where are you? On our street. Mr. Harrison's with me. I'll be right there. He arrived within 5 minutes. Too fast, I realized later, for someone who'd supposedly been at home. Like he'd been nearby, waiting. David helped me to my feet, his arm around my waist, his face tight with what looked like concern. Mom, what happened? Mr. Harrison explained before I could answer. The SUV, the deliberate swerve, the footage. David's expression didn't change. Thank God you're okay, Mom. We should get you home, make sure nothing's broken. Shouldn't we file a police report? Mr. Harrison asked. Absolutely, David said smoothly. But let's get her inside first, make sure she's stable. She could be in shock. Mr. Harrison looked uncertain but nodded. I'll email you the dashcam footage tonight, he said to me. And Eleanor, be careful. Whoever did this might try again. David drove me the 3 houses to my driveway, helped me inside, got me ice for my hip, cleaned the scrapes on my palms, asked me questions about pain, about dizziness, about whether I'd hit my head. But he never mentioned calling the police. And when I brought it up tentatively, because by then I was exhausted and hurting and just wanted to lie down, he'd said, let's see how you feel in the morning, Mom. If it's serious, we'll report it then. It hadn't felt wrong at the time. It had felt like a son taking care of his mother. The next day, Friday the 13th, Jessica's black Range Rover wasn't in the driveway. David mentioned casually over breakfast that she'd had to take it to the mechanic, something about the brakes making a noise. The brakes. I'd nodded, distracted by the pain in my hip, and thought nothing of it. Mr. Harrison had emailed me the footage that afternoon. I'd watched it once, my stomach churning, then saved it to a folder I'd labeled December Incidents. Some instinct I couldn't name had told me to keep it safe. 2 days later, David had surprised me with a London trip. Sitting in the casita now, Diane's hand still resting on mine, I saw it all with brutal clarity. Jessica had tried to end my life. Not subtly, not slowly, but immediately, a vehicle, a dark street, a supposed accident that would have looked tragic but explainable. Elderly woman struck by a car at dusk. Maybe she'd stepped into the road. Maybe her vision was failing. Maybe her confusion had gotten worse. The perfect end to their perfect plan. But Mr. Harrison had seen. Mr. Harrison had recorded. And Jessica's Range Rover, with its front bumper that had clipped my hip with whatever evidence might have been left on the metal or paint, had disappeared to a mechanic the very next day. David had known. He'd kept me from reporting it. He'd made sure there was no official investigation, no police looking into makes and models and partial plates. They'd tried 3 times. Sedation, framing, an attempt to end my life. And I'd almost let them succeed. By the time Diane and I finished talking, the December sun had sunk below the roof line, casting long shadows across the courtyard. We'd been in the casita for nearly 4 hours. Now came the hardest part. "You have to go back out there," Diane said quietly. "They'll be wondering where you are. And when I do, you act confused, disoriented, exactly what they expect." Diane's eyes were red-rimmed but focused. "We need time to gather evidence. If they know you're aware, they'll accelerate. Maybe even try again, the 4th attack. How long do we have?" "David mentioned rescheduling your flight for tomorrow morning. That means they're planning the commitment for December 17th. 2 days. 2 days to prove my son was trying to erase me." I stood checking my reflection in the casita's small mirror. I looked tired but clear-eyed, aware. I'd have to change that. "Remember," Diane whispered as she unlocked the door. "Every movement, every word. You're playing the role they've written for you." I nodded. Then I stepped into the courtyard. The fountain burbled. The air had cooled. Lights were on in the main house kitchen living room, David's study. I made myself walk slowly, unsteadily. The back door opened before I reached it. David stood backlit, his expression shifting from confusion to relief to concern. "Mom," he rushed toward me. "Where have you been? We've been looking everywhere." I let my face go slack. I gestured toward the casita. "I think I was resting." Resting. His hands gripped my shoulders. "Mom, you were supposed to be on a plane to London. Your flight left 3 hours ago." I blinked, let confusion cloud my features. Flight. But I thought that was tomorrow. Something flickered behind his eyes. Satisfaction. Then it was gone, replaced by worry. "No, Mom. Today, December 15th. Remember." Had we? I made myself look uncertain. Yes, maybe. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I must have gotten confused." He exhaled, his grip loosening. "It's okay. Let's get you inside." Jessica appeared in the kitchen doorway. Black leggings, cream sweater, hair pulled back. Her face was neutral, but her eyes tracked me like a scientist observing an experiment. "Eleanor," she said softly. "We were worried. Are you all right?" I fumbled with my cardigan. "I'm fine, just tired. I think I lost track of time." David guided me to the table, pulled out a chair. "Sit down, Mom. I'll make you tea." Every muscle tensed with pretense, but I forced my shoulders to slump. Jessica slid into the chair across from me. "Do you remember packing your suitcase this morning?" I shook my head slowly. "I remember..." David said something about London, but I don't remember packing. David set chamomile tea in front of me. His hand brushed my shoulder. "It's all right, Mom. You've been under stress. Maybe the trip was too much." "Maybe," I whispered. David and Jessica exchanged a look. Brief. Silent. The slight nod, the narrowing of her eyes, the way his jaw relaxed. They thought the plan was working. Dinner was elaborate performance. Diane served chicken and vegetables quietly, her face blank. I picked at my food, let my fork slip clattering against the plate. Asked David about London. Are we still going? Even though I'd just been told the flight was missed. Knocked over my water glass halfway through water, spreading across the table. Oh no, I murmured, reaching for a napkin with trembling hands, fake trembling, controlled trembling. I'm so clumsy tonight. It's okay, Mom. David grabbed paper towels. His voice was patient, the voice of a good son. Jessica said nothing, just watched. After dinner, David suggested I go to bed early. You've had a long day. I nodded, rising slowly. Yes, I think that's a good idea. Diane appeared at my side. I'll help Mrs. Wright upstairs. As we climbed the staircase, I heard David's phone ring in his study. His voice muffled through the door. I paused on the landing. Diane's hand tightened on my elbow. Oh, she's here, David was saying. She never made it to the airport. She's worse than we thought, completely disoriented, doesn't remember packing. A pause. Yeah, we need to move faster. Can you reschedule the flight for tomorrow morning, 8 a.m.? Another pause. My throat tightened with the lie I was living with, fear coiling in my stomach. And Daniels is ready good. We'll have her at the facility by Tuesday afternoon. Tuesday, December 17th. Diane pulled me away from the door, up the stairs, into my bedroom. She closed the door and leaned against it. Did you hear? She whispered. Tuesday. They're moving it to Tuesday. That gives us tomorrow to find something concrete. Documents, recordings, anything. I thought of David's office downstairs, the filing cabinet. Tonight, I said. While they're asleep, I'll search his office tonight. Diane's eyes widened. Mrs. Wright, if they catch you, they won't. They think I'm confused, remember. If I'm found wandering at night, it confirms their story. Diane pulled a small pill bottle from her apron. David will come up soon with your vitamins. Take these instead. She pressed it into my hand. Just melatonin enough to look sleepy, but you'll wake in a few hours. A knock at the door. Mom, David's voice soft. Can I come in? Diane shot me a look showtime, then opened the door. David stood holding a glass of water and 2 white pills. The pills I'd been taking for 6 months. Your vitamins, Mom, he said with a smile. Don't want to miss a dose. I took them from his hand, held them to my mouth, let him see me swallow, see me drink. But the pills stayed tucked in my cheek, hidden beneath my tongue. Good, David said, kissing my forehead. Sleep well. Tomorrow's a new day. He left, closing the door softly. I spat the pills into my hand, stared at them, small, white, ordinary. The instruments of my erasure. Diane took them, wrapped them in tissue. I'll have these tested. I swallowed the melatonin instead, lay down fully clothed, lights off, waiting for the house to go silent. Waiting for midnight when I'd slip downstairs and find the proof that would save my life. The melatonin pulled at me gently, not the heavy fog of David's pills, but a soft drowsiness I could fight through. I set my phone alarm for 2 a.m., buried it under my pillow so only I would hear the vibration. Through my closed door, I heard David and Jessica moving through the house. The creak of floorboards, water running in their bathroom, voices low and indistinct. Then finally silence. I lay still for another hour, counting my breaths, listening to the house settle around me. The hum of the heating system, the distant sound of a car passing on Lincoln Drive, the absolute quiet of a home where everyone was supposed to be asleep. At 2 a.m., my phone vibrated. I rose carefully, my hip still aching from the hit and run 3 days ago. Opened my door 1 inch at a time, listening. Nothing. The hallway was dark except for the small nightlight near the bathroom. David and Jessica's door was closed. No light beneath it. I moved toward the stairs, each step deliberate and silent. David's study was on the first floor off the living room. I'd been in it 1,000 times, helping him organize files when he first started his business, bringing him coffee during late work nights, standing in the doorway asking about his day. Now I was about to break into it like a thief, because that's what he'd made me. A stranger in my own home, searching for proof of my own existence. I had one day to find evidence. One day before they drag me to Desert Haven and bury me alive. David's study door was closed, but not locked. I turned the handle, slowly easing it open, 1 inch at a time, listening for the creak of hinges. Nothing. Just the soft whisper of wood against carpet. Inside the room was dark except for the faint glow of a street lamp filtering through the plantation shutters. Enough light to see shapes the desk, the leather chair, the filing cabinet against the far wall. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me. My pulse hammered in my ears loud enough that I was certain David would hear it upstairs. But the house remained silent. Just the hum of the heating system, the distant tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I'd been in this office countless times, brought David coffee during late work nights, helped him organize files when he first started his insurance business, stood in the doorway asking about his day. Now I was breaking into it like a stranger. I moved to the filing cabinet, my phone already in hand, flashlight app ready but not yet activated. I tried the top drawer first. It slid open, not locked. Either arrogance or carelessness, but I wasn't going to question the gift. Inside were hanging folders neatly labeled in David's precise handwriting. I scanned the tabs in the dim light. Taxes 2023, home insurance, investment accounts, and then mother medical. Cold sweat beaded on my neck as I pulled the folder free. Inside were medical reports, 6 of them printed on official letterhead from North Scottsdale Psychiatric Associates, Dr. Philip Daniels' practice. I activated my phone's flashlight, shielding the glow with my body, and read the first report. Date June 15, 2024. Patient Eleanor Wright. DOB, March 12, 1956. Presenting issue mild cognitive impairment. Occasional disorientation. Assessment early stage dementia. Recommend monthly monitoring. My breath came shallow and controlled. June 15th, 1 week after David started giving me the vitamins. The second report was dated July 20th. Moderate memory loss, increased confusion difficulty with routine tasks. August 25th. Progressive decline, spatial disorientation, recommend cognitive testing. September 30th. Marked deterioration episodes of paranoia, impaired judgment. October 28th. Severe cognitive impairment difficulty recognizing familiar faces. And the final report dated November 28th, 3 weeks ago. Advanced dementia, danger to self and others. Patient exhibits aggressive behavior. Immediate placement in supervised care facilities strongly recommended. Every word was a lie. Every signature, Dr. Philip Daniels, MD, was a betrayal. I photographed each page, my hands shaking, now the phone's camera shutter clicking softly in the darkness. The second folder was labeled Desert Haven. Inside a contract, 20 pages dense legal language, but the key details jumped out immediately. Facility Desert Haven. Behavioral health. Sedona, Arizona patient. Eleanor Wright. Financial responsibility. David Wright. Power of attorney initial deposit $75,000 paid. December 12th, 2024 monthly fee $12. $75,000, paid 3 days ago, the same day Jessica had tried to run me down. Clipped to the contract were pre-signed commitment forms. My name, David's signature as my medical proxy, blank spaces for the date, and Dr. Daniels' final authorization. They'd just been waiting for the right moment to file them. I photographed everything, every page, every signature line. The third folder held a single document, a life insurance policy from Western States Life. Policy number, beneficiary information, premium payments. Insured Eleanor Wright, death benefit, $1,500,000. Beneficiary David Wright. Policy date, June 18th, 2023. 18 months ago, long before I'd had any reason to suspect. Long before the pills, the fake diagnoses, the attacks. This had been planned for a year and a half. I steadied my breathing and kept photographing. The fourth document wasn't in a folder. It was a printed spreadsheet tucked beneath the insurance policy, a list of debts. Caesars Palace Casino, $420,000 online poker. Poker Stars, $230,000. Personal loan, K. Brooks, $50,000. Vertex Tech Solutions failed startup, $200,000. Total outstanding, $900,000. $900,000. More than Diane had said, more than I'd imagined. No wonder they were desperate. I photographed the spreadsheet, my throat tight. Then I saw the next document and my vision blurred at the edges. A printed obituary. Template format ready to submit to the Arizona Republic. Eleanor Marie Wright. March 12, 1956. Eleanor Wright, beloved mother and longtime resident of Scottsdale, passed peacefully on. After a courageous battle with dementia, she is survived by her devoted son, David Wright, and daughter-in-law, Jessica Wright. In lieu of flowers, donations may be made to the Alzheimer's Association. The date was blank, waiting. My hands trembled as I photographed it. The image came out blurred. I steadied myself, took another. One more folder remained, this one labeled simply J, background. I opened it. Marriage certificates, 2 of them. Jessica Marie Hartwell to Robert Sullivan, March 2018. Divorced, no, not divorced. Stamped across the bottom, widowed, August 14th, 2019. Robert Sullivan, passed at age 52, cause listed on the attached report acute myocardial infarction, heart attack. The second certificate, Jessica Marie Sullivan to Thomas Brennan, January 2020. Also stamped widowed November 3rd, 2021. Thomas Brennan, passed at age 59, cause accidental fall traumatic brain injury. 2 husbands. Both passed within 2 years of marriage. Both passed young. Both left estates. I could see the attached financial documents, inheritance amounts, life insurance payouts. Jessica wasn't just helping David. This was what she did. I photographed every page, my mind racing. How many more had there been before these 2? How many men had Jessica married, manipulated, widowed? A sound froze me mid-motion. A creak. Upstairs. Footsteps. I stood perfectly still, phone clutched in my hand, barely breathing. Seconds stretched. 10, 20, 30. Nothing. Just the house settling, the wood contracting in the cool night air. I forced myself to move, returned the folders to the cabinet exactly as I'd found them, closed the drawer silently, checked my phone, 47 photographs, 47 pieces of evidence, medical fraud, financial motive, life insurance, pre-written obituary, Jessica's history of convenient widowhood. I had proof. But proof alone wasn't enough. Not with 6 months of official medical records saying I was demented, confused, unreliable. Not when David could claim I'd fabricated the photos, that my paranoia was just another symptom of my decline. I needed more than documents. I needed witnesses. People who would testify. People who would believe me over my son. I slipped out of the study back across the dark living room through the kitchen into the courtyard. The casita door was unlocked. Diane had left it open for me. Inside, I sank onto the sofa, my legs finally giving way. 47 photos. I had my proof. Now I needed witnesses. Morning of December 17th, the day they planned to erase me. I came downstairs at 7, still playing the part for David's benefit. Shuffled slowly. Let my hand trail along the stair railing. Paused at the bottom as if momentarily disoriented. The kitchen smelled like coffee. Jessica stood at the counter in black yoga pants and a cashmere sweater, her back to me, pouring from the French press. Upstairs, I could hear the shower running. David getting ready for what he thought would be my final trip. Jessica turned as I entered. Her expression shifted to careful concern. "Eleanor, good morning. Did you sleep well?" I moved to the table, pulled out a chair, let my movements be slow, deliberate. "I think so. I don't—" "What day is it?" "Tuesday." She set a mug in front of me. "Your flight's this morning, remember." I wrapped my hands around the warm ceramic, looked up at her, and dropped the act completely. "I know about Desert Haven," I said, my voice cutting like glass. "I know about the insurance. I know about your 2 dead husbands." Jessica froze the coffee pot still in her hand. For 3 heartbeats, neither of us moved. Then slowly she set the pot down, turned to face me fully, and smiled. "You're sharper than David gives you credit for," she said quietly. No denial, no shock, no pretense of confusion or offense, just that cold knowing smile. "You should have taken the London trip, Eleanor She continued, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. "You should have gotten on that plane, enjoyed your week, come home tired and jet-lagged. Made this easier for everyone." Adrenaline sharpened my focus, but I kept my voice steady. "Why, you're already wealthy. David makes $200,000 a year. That's more than most people ever see." Jessica laughed a short, bitter sound. Your son is a gambling addict who owes dangerous people $650,000. And I didn't marry him for love, Eleanor. I married him because I did my research. The words landed with the weight of confession. Not admission, confession. Like she'd been waiting for someone to finally see her clearly. We met at a casino 3 years ago. She said, her tone almost conversational now. Caesar's Palace. He was at the high-stakes poker table, already down $40,000 that night, ordering doubles and laughing too loud. I sat next to him. Let him buy me a drink. Asked what he did for a living. She picked up her own coffee, took a slow sip. Insurance executive. Scottsdale. I looked him up the next day. Found out about you. About Robert's estate. About the $2.8 million sitting in trust, the house in Paradise Valley, the life you'd built as a single mother who worked her way up from nothing. My throat tightened, but I didn't look away. I courted him for 6 months before he proposed, Jessica continued. Played the understanding girlfriend. The woman who didn't judge his gambling, who supported his startup dreams, who made him feel like he deserved more than he had. You researched me, I said flatly. Like a target. Like an investment. She set her mug down, met my eyes without flinching. You're sitting on $2.8 million, Eleanor, doing nothing with it. Your son is drowning in debt, about to lose everything, and you could have helped him. But you didn't. So we found another way. By framing me as demented, by trying to have me committed, by planning to let me die in that facility so you could collect the insurance money in my estate. By giving your resources to someone who would actually use them, Jessica corrected. Her voice was calm, rational, like we were discussing a business transaction. You've had your life, Eleanor. You raised your son. You built your career. Now you're just existing, taking up space, holding on to money you'll never spend. Calm settled over me, cold and final. So you decided I was disposable. I decided you were an obstacle. She tilted her head slightly. And obstacles can be moved. The shower upstairs shut off. David would be down in minutes. I'm going to the police, I said. Jessica's smile didn't waver. With what, 6 months of medical records from a licensed psychiatrist saying you're confused, paranoid, delusional documentation of violent episodes, witnesses who've seen you disoriented and forgetful. She leaned forward slightly. Eleanor, if you walk into a police station and start talking about conspiracies and frame-ups, they're going to call your son. And David's going to show them all those records and say, see, this is exactly what Dr. Daniels warned us about. She's getting worse. She was right. I hated that she was right, but she was. The paper fortress David had built around me was designed for exactly this moment. You won't get away with this, I said, but even I could hear how hollow it sounded. We already have. Jessica picked up her coffee again, took another sip. The deposit's paid. The paperwork's ready. Dr. Daniels is standing by. By this afternoon, you'll be at Desert Haven, and by next week, you'll be just another sad case of an elderly woman whose mind failed her. Footsteps on the stairs. David coming down. Jessica's expression shifted instantly. Concern replacing calculation. Warmth replacing ice. Eleanor, please sit back down. You're getting agitated again. David appeared in the doorway, hair damp, dressed in slacks and a button-down. His eyes moved between us, reading the tension in the air. Everything okay? He asked carefully. Your mother's having another confused morning. Jessica said, her voice soft and worried. She's been saying strange things. Accusations. David's face tightened with what looked like sadness. Mom, we talked about this. The paranoia is part of the condition. Dr. Daniels said it would get worse. I stood slowly, my hands steady, even though my pulse was racing. I need to use the bathroom. I walked past both of them up the stairs into my bedroom, closed the door, pulled out my phone, opened the text thread with Diane. Get Susan Marshall from APS. Get Officer Robert Pierce, Sky Harbor Airport Terminal 4, 9 a.m. Tell them everything. Show them the photos. This ends today. I hit send. Then I sat on the edge of my bed and waited. They thought they'd won. They thought the paper trail protected them, that the system was on their side, that an elderly woman's word meant nothing against official documentation. They were wrong. Because I wasn't going to fight them with words. I was going to fight them with witnesses. If you're still here, comment 9, so I know you're still with me. And tell me honestly, if you were in this situation knowing everything but having only one chance left, what would you do next? Before we continue, just a quick note, parts of the next chapter include dramatized elements for storytelling purposes. If this isn't for you, feel free to stop here. David drove. Jessica sat in the passenger seat, silent and still her hands folded in her lap. I sat in the back staring out the window at the December morning playing my final role, the docile, confused mother, one last time. Excited about London, Mom? David asked, his voice bright. Too bright. You're going to love it. Big Ben, the tower, all those bookstores you've always wanted to see. I let my response come slow, uncertain. London, yes, that's today, right now. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror and I saw satisfaction flicker across his face. We're almost at the airport. Jessica said nothing, just stared straight ahead. David pulled a pill bottle from the center console as we merged onto the highway. Don't forget your morning vitamins, Mom. He shook 2 white tablets into his palm, handed them back with a bottle of water. I took them, lifted them to my mouth, drank. But the pills stayed hidden in my cheek, tucked against my gum. I swallowed only water. Phoenix Sky Harbor rose ahead of us, the control tower stark against the pale blue sky. December 17th, 9 in the morning, the day they thought they'd won. David parked in the departures lane at Terminal 4, popped the trunk, pulled out a wheelchair. Is that necessary? I asked, letting confusion color my voice. Just a precaution, Mom. You've been unsteady lately. He helped me into it, his hands gentle on my shoulders. The performance of a devoted son. Jessica walked ahead, pulling my small suitcase, one she must have packed herself since I'd never touched it. She moved through the sliding doors without looking back. Inside, the terminal hummed with morning travelers, families with strollers, business people checking phones, the smell of coffee and jet fuel. And near the security checkpoint, exactly where I'd hoped 2 figures standing together watching. Susan Marshall, 52 gray suit APS identification badge clipped to her belt. I'd never met her, but Diane had described her perfectly. And beside her, Officer Robert Pierce. 43, lean and alert in his uniform, the same officer who'd taken the report when Jessica staged the violent episode in my kitchen. Relief washed through me, but I kept my face blank. David wheeled me toward the check-in counter. Let's get you through security, Mom. Flight leaves in an hour. Mr. Wright. Susan Marshall's voice cut through the terminal noise. Professional, firm. David stopped, turned. Yes, she walked toward us, Officer Pierce, a step behind. Mr. Wright, I'm Susan Marshall with Adult Protective Services. This is Officer Pierce. We need to speak with your mother. David's smile didn't waver, but I saw his knuckles go white on the wheelchair handles. Of course. Although I should mention my mother's been experiencing significant cognitive decline. She can get confused, disoriented. If this is about Mrs. Wright. Susan crouched beside the wheelchair, her eyes meeting mine. Are you Eleanor Wright? I looked at her, at Officer Pierce, at the people moving through the terminal around us. Witnesses, dozens of them. I stood up from the wheelchair. David's hand shot out. Mom, sit down, you're not... My voice carried across the terminal, clear and strong. I'm not going to London, and I'm not going to Desert Haven. The color drained from David's face. Jessica turned, her expression shifting from calculation to alarm in half a second. She took a step toward me. Eleanor, you're confused. I'm not confused. I pulled my phone from my pocket, held it out to Susan Marshall. I have 47 photographs, fake medical records, a life insurance policy taken out 18 months ago, a list of my son's debts totaling $900,000, a pre-written obituary with my death date left blank, and documentation of Jessica's 2 previous husbands, both of whom passed within 2 years of marriage. Susan took the phone, started scrolling. Her face went grave. Mom, please. David's voice cracked. You're not well. You don't know what you're saying. Officer Pierce stepped forward, his hand resting on his belt. Mr. Wright stepped back. She's demented. David's voice rose, desperate now. She's been diagnosed. Dr. Daniels has 6 months of reports. Ask him. Call him right now. Dr. Philip Daniels. I said, my voice steady, who's been falsifying psychiatric evaluations for $10,000 per patient. His name is in those photos. along with the deposit receipt for Desert Haven, $75,000 paid 3 days ago. The same day, Jessica tried to run me down with her car. Jessica moved, fast, spinning toward the exit. Security. Officer Pierce's voice cracked like a whip. 2 airport security officers intercepted Jessica before she made it 10 feet. Her purse hit the floor, contents scattering. She didn't scream, didn't fight. Just stood there, breathing hard, her mask finally shattered. Susan Marshall looked up from my phone. Mr. Wright, based on what I'm seeing here, I'm placing your mother in emergency protective custody. Officer Pierce, Mrs. Wright. Officer Pierce moved to my side. Are you in immediate danger? I was. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the 2 pills David had given me in the car, held them out. These are the vitamins my son's been giving me every morning for 6 months. I'd like them tested, along with the bottle in his car. Something broke inside me then, not cleanly, but jagged and painful, because David's legs buckled. He didn't fall, but he swayed, grabbing the edge of the check-in counter, his face twisted between panic and shame and something that might have been grief. Mom, he whispered. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to stop. The debt, the pressure, Jessica said it was the only way. Officer Pierce pulled handcuffs from his belt. David Wright, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder abuse fraud and attempted custodial interference. You have the right to remain silent. The words faded as I watched my son's hands pulled behind his back, watched the metal close around his wrists, watched him become a criminal in the middle of an airport terminal while travelers stopped and stared and pulled out their phones. My son, the boy I'd raised alone, the child I'd sacrificed everything for. I should have felt triumph, vindication, the satisfaction of justice served. Instead, I felt only the hollow ache of a mother watching her child's choices destroy him. Susan Marshall touched my arm gently. Mrs. Wright, I'd like to take you to the hospital. Have you examined? Make sure you're safe. I nodded, unable to speak. As Officer Pierce led David away, Jessica already being escorted by security toward a different exit, my son looked back at me once. I'm sorry, Mom, he said again. I didn't answer. What could I possibly say? I woke in a hospital bed 3 hours later, fluorescent lights burning my eyes, white ceiling tiles, the smell of antiseptic, the steady beep of a monitor beside me. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was or why. Then it all came back. The airport, David's face draining of color, Jessica being restrained, the handcuffs closing around my son's wrists. Mrs. Wright, a woman's voice gentle. You're at Scottsdale Osborne Medical Center. You're safe. Susan Marshall sat in a chair beside the bed, her gray suit wrinkled, now her expression tired but kind. You had a panic attack at the airport. The paramedics gave you a mild sedative. You've been sleeping for about 3 hours. I tried to sit up. My body felt heavy, my thoughts still foggy from whatever they'd given me. Take your time, Susan said. But when you're ready, we need your full statement. Everything that happened. Detective Foster is waiting outside. Detective, Financial Crimes Unit. This case is bigger than we thought. She helped me sit up, adjusted the pillows behind me, brought me water. My hands shook as I drank. A man entered. Early 50s, dark hair, graying at the temples, wearing a rumpled sport coat and carrying a digital recorder. He pulled up a second chair. Mrs. Wright, I'm Detective Ray Foster. He had a calm, measured voice. The voice of someone who'd heard 1,000 terrible stories and learned to listen without judgment. I've been investigating Desert Haven behavioral health for 2 years. Your case might be the break we've been waiting for. 2 years. He nodded. 47 suspected victims. 12 of them passed away under what we believe were suspicious circumstances. But we've never had someone escape. We've never had evidence this concrete. You did something remarkable today. I didn't feel remarkable. I felt exhausted. For the next 90 minutes, I told them everything. The surprise London trip, Diane's warning, the black van, the 3 attacks, the restaurant, the violent episode, the hit and run. The night I searched David's office, the confrontation with Jessica, every detail, every date, every name. Susan recorded it all. Detective Foster took notes, asked clarifying questions, his pen moving steadily across his notepad. "And you have photographs?" he asked. I handed him my phone, watched his expression darken as he scrolled through the 47 images, the fake medical reports, the Desert Haven contract, David's debt list, the pre-written obituary, Jessica's marriage certificates to 2 men who'd both passed young. "We'll need to send these to our forensics team," he said. And the pills, Officer Pierce logged them into evidence at the airport. "We'll have the lab results in 48 hours, but based on what you've described, I'd bet my pension they're sedatives mixed with cognitive disruptors." "What about David?" The question came out quieter than I'd intended. Detective Foster's expression softened slightly. "In custody at the Maricopa County Jail. He's asked for a lawyer, so has Jessica. And Dr. Daniels, we're bringing him in for questioning this evening, along with the administrator at Desert Haven. This is going to be a complex prosecution, Mrs. Wright. Multiple charges, multiple defendants. But with your testimony and the evidence you gathered, I'm confident we can make it stick." Exhaustion settled over me like a weight. "How many others? You said 12 passed away?" 12 confirmed. But we suspect there were more. Elderly patients with no family, no advocates. People who disappeared into that facility and never came out. Your case is different because you fought back. You gathered proof. You found allies. Diane, Beverly, Mr. Harrison, even Officer Pierce, who'd seen me at my worst and still listened when it mattered. "Can I see my son?" I asked. Detective Foster exchanged a glance with Susan. "Not right now. He's being processed. And honestly, Mrs. Wright, I'd advise against it until after the arraignment. Anything you say to each other could be used in court." I nodded, though grief sat heavy in my chest. A knock at the door. A nurse poked her head in. "Mrs. Wright, you have visitors, a Beverly Thompson and a Mr. Harrison." "Let them in," Susan said. Beverly rushed in first, her face pale, her book club tote bag still on her shoulder. "Eleanor, my God, I just heard. I saw it on the news. They're saying David and Jessica were arrested for elder abuse. I can't believe it. I just saw you 5 days ago. You walked to my house. You seemed fine." "I was fine," I said. "That was the problem. I was always fine. They just made everyone think I wasn't." Mr. Harrison appeared behind her, moving more slowly, his wire-rimmed glasses slightly askew. He held a USB drive. "Mrs. Wright, I brought the dash cam footage. The detective said you'd need it." Detective Foster took the drive. "We already have a copy from the email you sent, but this will be the original. Thank you, Mr. Harrison." "That car aimed for her," Mr. Harrison said firmly. "I've been an engineer for 40 years. I know the difference between an accident and intentional action. That driver saw Eleanor and accelerated." "The footage confirms it," Detective Foster said. "We've already matched the vehicle to Jessica Wright's Range Rover. Partial plate matches what Mrs. Wright remembered. Paint transfer from the hedge matches the vehicle's front bumper. We impounded it this afternoon." Beverly sank into the chair Susan had vacated. "Eleanor, I'm so sorry. If I'd seen something—" "You couldn't have known," I said. "They were very good at hiding it. Even I didn't see it until Diane warned me." We talked for another 20 minutes. Beverly promised to bring me clothes, toiletries, anything I needed. Mr. Harrison offered to check on my house, make sure it was secure. Detective Foster gave them both his card, asked them to call if they remembered anything else relevant. Eventually, they left. Susan and Detective Foster left. The nurse came in, checked my vitals, dimmed the lights, told me to rest. And I was alone. The hospital room settled into quiet. Just the beep of the monitor, the distant sound of voices in the hallway, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on me. I reached for my purse. Someone had brought it from the airport. Inside, tucked in the side pocket, was my wallet. And in the wallet, behind my driver's license, was a photograph. David at 8 years old. Gap-toothed smile, Little League uniform, standing in our backyard in Ohio, holding a baseball bat, his eyes bright with joy. When had that child become the man in handcuffs? Where did I lose you, my son? The question haunted me as I lay in the hospital bed, staring at that photograph, searching for the moment when love had twisted into greed, when gratitude had soured into entitlement, when the boy I'd raised alone had decided I was worth more gone than alive. I didn't have an answer. I wasn't sure I ever would. The call came the next morning while I was still at the hospital waiting for discharge papers. "Mrs. Wright, this is Detective Foster." His voice was careful, measured. "David Wright wants to make a statement. He's asked if you'd be willing to listen." I stared out the hospital window at the December sky. Clear, cold, indifferent. "Does he want to see me?" "No. He's requested that you observe through the one-way glass. He says he can't look you in the eye, but he wants you to hear the truth." Something cracked in my chest, not breaking, just opening, letting in the cold. "I'll come," I said. An hour later, I sat in a small observation room at the Scottsdale Police Department. Gray walls, a single chair, a pane of glass looking into an interrogation room where my son sat across a metal table from Detective Foster. David looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. His dress shirt was wrinkled, the top button undone, no tie. His hands were cuffed in front of him, resting on the table. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face unshaven, his hair disheveled. He looked like a stranger. Detective Foster activated the speaker so I could hear. Then he nodded to David. "Whenever you're ready, Mr. Wright." David's voice came through tinny but clear. "I want to tell you everything. From the beginning." He took a shaky breath. "It started 5 years ago, 2019. I was under a lot of pressure at work, new accounts quotas competition. I started going to Casino Arizona after work, just to unwind, I told myself. A few hands of poker, a couple drinks, harmless." His hands clenched on the table, but it wasn't harmless. By 2020, I was going 3-4 times a week. Poker turned into blackjack, blackjack turned into high-stakes tables. I'd win sometimes. Enough to convince myself I was good at it, that I could control it. Words landed like stones in the quiet room. By 2022, I'd lost $400,000. I'd maxed out credit cards, taken loans against my 401k, borrowed from friends. And when the banks wouldn't give me any more, I went to other people. The kind of people who don't ask for collateral because they know other ways to make you pay. Loan sharks. My son had borrowed from loan sharks. That's when I met Jessica. David continued. Caesar's Palace in Vegas. I was down $60,000 that night, drunk, desperate. She sat next to me at the poker table. Beautiful, confident, interested. She bought me a drink. Asked about my life. I told her everything. About the debts, about you, about the money sitting in trust from Dad's estate. He laughed a bitter, broken sound. She didn't judge me. She said she understood. She said her first husband had had gambling problems too, that she knew how to help someone get out from under that kind of pressure. We started dating. 6 months later, I proposed. Detective Foster's pen moved steadily across his notepad. Jessica was the one who found Desert Haven, David said. She'd worked in elder care before, she said. She knew facilities, knew doctors who were flexible. She introduced me to Dr. Daniels, then to Kenneth Brooks. How did she know Mr. Brooks? Foster asked. David's jaw tightened. He was her boyfriend, before me. She'd helped him with some financial scheme a few years back. I don't know the details. He owed her money, and she said if he helped us, she'd forgive the debt. Kenneth hadn't been just David's friend. He'd been Jessica's pawn. And then my startup failed. David continued, his voice hollow now. Vertex Tech Solutions. I'd put $200,000 into it, borrowed most of it. When the company went under in 2023, I was drowning. $850,000 in debt. People calling me, threatening me. I couldn't sleep, couldn't think. He looked down at his cuffed hands. Jessica said there was a way out. She said Mom was old, that she'd lived her life, that the money was just sitting there while I was being destroyed. She said, why should we wait for nature to take its course? Why not? Accelerate things. Resolve hardened inside me, cold and final. She planned everything, David said. The pills, the fake diagnoses, the Desert Haven deposit. Dr. Daniels charged us $10,000 per report. Marcus Brennan, the administrator at Desert Haven, got $25,000 as a kickback for each patient placed. It was a system, a business. And the pills, Foster asked, what were they? Sedatives mixed with something Jessica got from a contact of hers. She said it would make Mom seem confused without actually hurting her brain. I told myself it was temporary, that once we had the money, once the debts were paid, I'd get Mom out of Desert Haven. I'd tell her the truth. I'd make it right. The lie was so thin I could see through it even now. When did the pills start? Foster asked. June 2024, right after we bought the life insurance policy. 18 months of planning, 6 months of poisoning. And the attacks Foster pressed. The restaurant incident, the domestic disturbance, the hit and run. David's face crumpled. The restaurant was Jessica's idea. Slip something in Mom's water in public, create a medical record. The domestic thing, that was Jessica, too. She provoked Mom, staged the whole thing, made sure there was a police report. He stopped, swallowed hard. But the hit and run, I swear to God I didn't know about that until after. Jessica went out that Thursday afternoon, came back 3 hours later. The next day, her Range Rover was at the mechanic. When I asked why, she said the brakes were making noise. I didn't think anything of it. You didn't think anything of it, Foster repeated, his tone flat. I didn't want to think about it, David corrected, his voice breaking. Because if I thought about it, I'd have to admit what we were really doing, that we weren't just convincing people Mom needed help. We were trying to... He stopped, couldn't say it. Foster said it for him. You were trying to end her life. David's shoulders shook. Mom, I'm sorry. He looked up at the one-way glass, though he couldn't see me. I know you're there. I know you're listening. And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't deserve anything from you. I was a coward. I let Jessica manipulate me. I let my weakness destroy everything you built. I'm so sorry. I sat in the observation room watching my son cry and felt nothing but a deep, aching emptiness. Detective Foster closed his notebook. Mr. Wright, I need to inform you that Jessica Hartwell, her real name, by the way, not Wright, has 3 prior identities we've uncovered. She's suspected in 4 other cases involving suspicious passings, 2 husbands, as you know, but also 2 elderly individuals who placed her as a beneficiary in their wills shortly before passing away under questionable circumstances. David's face went white. You weren't her first, Foster continued, and if Mrs. Wright hadn't escaped, you wouldn't have been her last. The detective left the interrogation room and entered the observation room where I sat. Mrs. Wright, he said gently, you have a choice. We can proceed with full criminal charges, conspiracy, elder abuse, fraud, attempted harm. Or given that David is cooperating and has shown remorse, we can explore family mediation and restorative justice options. It's your decision. I looked through the glass at my son, broken, ashamed, crying. The boy I'd raised, the man who'd chosen greed over love. Press charges, I said quietly. All of them. Foster nodded. Are you sure? I turned to face him. He's my son. I love him. I always will. But he chose to end my life. That choice has consequences. It does, Foster agreed. I stood, gathered my purse, walked toward the door. Mrs. Wright, Foster called after me. For what it's worth, you did the right thing. I paused, looked back at the glass one more time. David had his head in his hands, shoulders heaving. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt like a mother who just lost her child. Again. The hotel room was sterile and anonymous. Beige walls, generic landscape art, a view of the parking lot. Not home. But my home was a crime scene now cordoned off with yellow tape, while forensic teams photographed David's office, collected evidence, cataloged the instruments of my near erasure. I'd been there 3 days when Detective Foster called. Mrs. Wright, the FBI is joining the investigation. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing yesterday's clothes. Diane had brought me a suitcase, but I hadn't had the energy to unpack. Why FBI? Wire fraud across state lines. Dr. Daniels has patients in California and Nevada. Desert Haven received federal Medicare payments. And Jessica Wright... He paused. Jessica Hartwell has warrants in 2 other states under different names. This is bigger than Scottsdale. Bigger than me. By December 21st, the lab results came back. Detective Foster delivered them in person, sitting across from me in the hotel's breakfast area over bitter coffee neither of us drank. The pills contained diphenhydramine, that's the active ingredient in sleep aids, like Benadryl, mixed with melatonin and low-dose benzodiazepines. 6 months of daily use would cause exactly the symptoms you experienced: drowsiness, confusion, short-term memory impairment, disorientation. But no permanent damage, I asked. Not to your brain, no. Your cognition should return to baseline within a few weeks as the substances clear your system. He closed the folder. You were lucky, Mrs. Wright. If you'd gone to Desert Haven if they'd kept you on those pills for another 6 months. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. On December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, Desert Haven Behavioral Health was shut down by court order. Marcus Brennan, the facility's administrator, was arrested at his home in Sedona. Detective Foster told me he'd been paid $25,000 for every patient placed through Dr. Daniels' referrals. 47 patients over 3 years. Over $1 million in kickbacks. The same day, the Maricopa County District Attorney's Office filed 4 separate criminal cases. State of Arizona versus Jessica Marie Hartwell. She'd legally changed her name back. Foster said, distancing herself from the Wrights. Charges conspiracy, elder abuse fraud, attempted harm. The prosecutor was seeking life without parole. State of Arizona versus David Robert Wright. Charges elder abuse, conspiracy, fraud, poisoning. 25 years recommended. State of Arizona versus Kenneth Brooks. Charges conspiracy accessory, 20 years. State of Arizona versus Philip Daniels, MD. Charges medical fraud conspiracy, 47 counts of elder abuse. 15 years plus restitution. I met the lead prosecutor the day after Christmas. Her name was Lisa Porter. 41, sharp-eyed, wearing a black suit and carrying a litigation bag that looked like it weighed 20 pounds. Mrs. Wright, she said, shaking my hand firmly. This is the biggest elder abuse case in Arizona history, maybe the biggest in the country, and you're the reason we can prosecute it. I'm just one person, I said. You're the one who escaped. You're the one who gathered evidence. You're the one who came forward. She opened her bag, pulled out a thick binder. We've identified 12 individuals who passed away at Desert Haven under suspicious circumstances. Families are coming forward. They want justice. And they're looking to you as proof that the system can work. The weight of that settled over me. I wasn't just Eleanor Wright anymore. I was a symbol. The media found me on December 28th. I'd gone to the hotel lobby for coffee, and there they were. Cameras. Microphones. A reporter from Channel 3 asking if I'd comment on the mother who stopped her own attempted end. Detective Foster had warned me this would happen. He'd offered media training a publicist. I'd declined. I didn't want to be on television. I didn't want my face on CNN with a chyron reading Scottsdale woman escapes son's plot. But I was. By New Year's Eve, my story had gone national. CNN, MSNBC. Even the Arizona Republic ran a front-page feature, The Mother Who Fought Back How One Woman Exposed Arizona's Largest Elder Abuse Network. I stopped reading the articles, stopped watching the news. It felt voyeuristic, like watching my own life from outside my body. Instead, I met with the families. Lisa Porter arranged it. A conference room at the DA's office. 12 families whose elderly relatives had been placed at Desert Haven and never come out alive. Beatrice Stone was 73, silver-haired, her hands shaking as she held a photograph of her late husband. Marcus, she said. He was 76. Our daughter convinced him to update his will, then had him placed at Desert Haven. Dr. Daniels said he had dementia, but Marcus was sharp as a tack. He'd been a mathematics professor. He didn't have dementia. He'd passed 6 months after placement. Heart failure, the death certificate said. But the autopsy ordered by Beatrice after she'd grown suspicious showed elevated levels of the same drugs that had been in my pills. Your daughter, I asked carefully. In custody. Thanks to your case, they reopened Marcus's investigation. Found $400,000 she'd transferred from his accounts to hers. Beatrice looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. You saved my husband's memory, Mrs. Wright. You proved he wasn't crazy. That matters more than you know. We sat in that conference room for 3 hours, 12 families, 12 stories, 12 people who'd been told their loved ones were declining, confused, dangerous, when really they'd been medicated into silence. Something shifted in my chest from grief to resolve. This wasn't just about me and David anymore. In January, I gave my deposition. 8 hours over 2 days in a windowless room with Lisa Porter, 2 FBI agents, and a court stenographer. They asked me to recount everything June through December, every pill, every appointment, every attack. By the end of the second day, my voice was hoarse and my hands were shaking from exhaustion. "You did beautifully," Lisa said as we finished. "This testimony will anchor all 4 prosecutions." Diane had been waiting in the lobby. She'd moved into my hotel room a week after Christmas, sleeping on the pull-out couch, bringing me meals I barely touched. Sitting with me through the nightmares that came most nights, dreams of black vans of pills dissolving on my tongue of David's face as the handcuffs closed. "It's over," Diane asked as we walked to the car. "No," I said. "It's just beginning." That night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. Diane checked it first. She'd been screening everything protecting me from reporters and curiosity seekers. "Mrs. Wright," she said carefully. "It's from David." My hand trembled as I took the phone. "Mom, I know you'll never forgive me, but thank you for stopping me before I became worse than I already am. You saved me from becoming a killer. I'm sorry isn't enough, but it's all I have. D." I read it 3 times. Then I set the phone down and looked at Diane. "I'm not just fighting for me anymore," I said. "I'm fighting for all of them. Beatrice, the families, the 47 victims who didn't escape. I'm going to make sure this never happens to anyone else." Diane's eyes filled with tears. "How?" "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I'll figure it out." Purpose settled into me then, warm and solid. Not replacing the grief, nothing could do that, but giving it direction, giving it meaning. I'd lost my son, but maybe I could save someone else's mother. February 10th, Maricopa County Superior Court, Courtroom 4B. I sat in the second row directly behind the prosecution table wearing a navy dress Diane had helped me pick out. Professional, respectful, the clothes of a credible witness. Jessica sat at the defense table in a cream blouse and gray slacks, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, her hands folded. She looked like a concerned daughter-in-law, a woman falsely accused. She didn't look at me once during jury selection. 12 jurors, 7 women, 5 men. Ages ranging from late 20s to early 60s. Lisa Porter, the prosecutor, had explained what she was looking for. People with elderly parents, people who understood vulnerability, people who'd believed that a system designed to protect could be weaponized. By the end of the day, the jury was seated. February 11th, opening statements. Lisa Porter stood before the jury, her voice clear and unwavering. "This is a case about greed disguised as care. About a woman who made a career of preying on the elderly and the people who loved them. Jessica Hartwell, who, as Jessica Wright, didn't marry for love. She married for money. And when her targets were no longer useful, she made them disappear." She laid out the timeline. The casino meeting with David in 2022, the research into my finances, the marriage in 2023, the life insurance policy purchased in June 2023. The pills starting in June 2024, the 3 escalating attacks, the Desert Haven conspiracy. "Eleanor Wright is alive today," Lisa said, "because a housekeeper loved her enough to risk everything, and because Mrs. Wright fought back. But 12 others weren't so lucky." The defense attorney, a man in his 50s named Gregory Marsh, presented Jessica as a victim. A woman trapped in a relationship with a gambling addict, manipulated and coerced, trying desperately to help her elderly mother-in-law, even as that mother-in-law turned against her. It was a weak narrative, but it was all they had. February 12th, my turn. Lisa Porter called me to the stand. I raised my right hand, swore to tell the truth, and sat in the witness box facing the courtroom. For 2 hours, I told my story. The surprise London trip, Diane's warning, the black van, the 3 attacks, the restaurant, the violent episode, the hit and run, the night I searched David's office, the confrontation with Jessica in the kitchen, the airport showdown. Lisa asked for dates, times, witnesses. I provided them all. December 3rd, December 8th, December 12th, December 15th, 17th. Then came cross-examination. Gregory Marsh approached with a sympathetic smile. "Mrs. Wright, you're 68 years old, correct?" "Yes." "And you were diagnosed with cognitive decline by Dr. Philip Daniels, a licensed psychiatrist." "I was never diagnosed with anything. Dr. Daniels falsified those reports." "But you experienced confusion, didn't you?" "Memory lapses, disorientation, because I was being poisoned." He held up a medical report. "This document from December 8th shows you attacked your daughter-in-law. pushed her, caused injury. She grabbed my wrist. I pulled away. She staged the fall. Or perhaps you don't remember accurately. Perhaps your memory of these events is compromised. Testimony drained me, but I kept my voice steady. My memory is fine, Mr. Marsh. I remember everything, and I have 47 photographs, witness statements, and dash cam footage to prove it. He tried for another 20 minutes, tried to paint me as paranoid, vindictive, a mother-in-law who'd never accepted Jessica. But I didn't waver. I recounted every detail with dates, times, corroborating evidence. Finally, Lisa stood. Your Honor, we'd like to show Exhibit 27, dashcam footage from December 12th. The courtroom lights dimmed, a screen descended. And there I was, walking down my street at dusk, the black Range Rover accelerating, swerving onto the sidewalk. The moment I threw myself into the hedge, the vehicle clipping me, spinning me around, the brake lights as it sped away. Someone in the jury box gasped. Another juror's hand flew to her mouth. The footage was 30 seconds long. It felt like a lifetime. February 13th. The prosecution's case continued. David took the stand. He'd been transported from jail, still in his orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed. He looked thinner, older, broken. He confirmed everything I'd said. Jessica had planned it. Jessica had researched Desert Haven. Jessica had convinced him this was the only way. What is the defendant's real name? Lisa asked. Jessica Hartwell. She was born in Nevada. She married Robert Sullivan in 2018 under the name Jessica Hartwell. Then Thomas Brennan in 2020 under the name Jessica Sullivan. She told me she'd been widowed twice, that it was tragic. I didn't know until the police investigation that both men had left her significant estates, that both had passed young. Kenneth Brooks testified next. Confirmed Jessica had recruited him, promised him $100,000, threatened to expose his prior fraud convictions if he didn't cooperate. Then Dr. Philip Daniels, gray-faced, stripped of his medical license, testifying under an immunity deal, he admitted everything, $10,000 per fake diagnosis. 47 patients over 3 years, a system designed by Jessica Hartwell and executed with cold efficiency. February 14th, Valentine's Day. The defense rested after calling only 3 witnesses. Character witnesses who said Jessica had been kind, charitable, misunderstood. None of them had known her for more than 2 years. Then Gregory Marsh made a fatal error. The defense calls Jessica Wright to the stand. Lisa's head snapped up. Defendants rarely testified too risky, too easy to self-incriminate under cross-examination. But Jessica stood, smoothed her blouse, and walked to the witness box. She maintained her innocence. She'd been trying to help me. David had been abusive, controlling. She'd only gone along with his plans out of fear. Lisa's cross-examination was surgical. Ms. Hartwell, you married Robert Sullivan in March 2018, correct? Yes. And he passed away in August 2019. Heart attack. Age 52. Yes, it was tragic. You inherited approximately $600,000 from his estate. Yes. And then you married Thomas Brennan in January 2020. Yes. He passed away in November 2021. Accidental fall. Age 59. You inherited approximately $600,000 from his estate as well. Jessica's jaw tightened. I didn't cause their passings. No, Lisa pulled out a document. These are your bank records, Ms. Hartwell. $1.2 million deposited between 2019 and 2022, all from life insurance policies and estate settlements. The courtroom was silent. Those men were weak, Jessica said suddenly, her voice sharp. They drank too much. They didn't take care of themselves. I didn't make them pass. They made their own choices. Her lawyer's face went pale. And Eleanor Wright? Lisa asked quietly. Was she weak too? Jessica's expression shifted just for a second, the mask slipping. A cold smile. Eleanor almost was. The jury's faces hardened. 3 jurors looked away. One woman shook her head. It was over. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes. When they returned, the 4 women stood. On the charge of conspiracy to commit harm, how do you find guilty? On the charge of elder abuse, guilty. On the charge of fraud, guilty. All counts, guilty. The judge set sentencing for immediate pronouncement. Life without the possibility of parole. Jessica didn't react, didn't cry, didn't scream. She just stood as the bailiffs approached, let them cuff her hands behind her back, and turned toward the exit. As she passed my row, she looked at me and smiled. Not apologetic, not defeated, just cold, empty. I watched her disappear through the door, watched the courtroom empty, felt Diane's hand on my shoulder. "You won," Diane whispered, but I didn't feel like I'd won. I just felt tired. With Jessica convicted, the remaining 3 trials moved quickly. March 15th, David's turn. He'd already entered a guilty plea, elder abuse conspiracy poisoning. The plea deal had been arranged weeks earlier, 25 years in exchange for his testimony against Jessica. Eligible for parole in 15. I sat in the back of the courtroom for his sentencing. The same courtroom where Jessica had been convicted a month earlier, but it felt different now. Smaller, more intimate, like the walls were pressing in. David was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed in front of him, his face gaunt. He'd lost weight. His hair had grown out unkempt. He looked nothing like the successful insurance executive who'd surprised me with a London trip 4 months ago. The judge reviewed the charges, asked if David understood his plea agreement. David's voice was barely audible. "Yes, Your Honor." "Mr. Wright, you've pleaded guilty to conspiring to harm your own mother through fraud, abuse, and poisoning. Do you have anything to say before I pronounce sentence?" "Soam. Chatitansantant." David turned, looked directly at me for the first time since the airport. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm sorry." I sat perfectly still, said nothing. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in the Arizona Department of Corrections, eligible for parole after 15 years contingent on good behavior and completion of rehabilitation programs. David was led away. He glanced back once more as the bailiffs guided him through the side door. I stood, gathered my purse, walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Diane was waiting in the hallway. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," I said honestly. That night, alone in my hotel room, grief finally broke through. I cried for the first time since the airport, not for myself, not for what David had tried to do to me, but for the little boy I'd raised alone. The child who'd clung to my hand on his first day of kindergarten, the teenager who'd worked 2 jobs to help with bills when money was tight, the young man who'd walked across the stage at college graduation and mouthed, "Thank you, Mom," when he received his diploma. Where had that boy gone? When had gratitude curdled into entitlement? When had love twisted into greed? I cried until my chest ached and my eyes burned, and Diane knocked softly on the door to make sure I was all right. "I'm fine," I told her through the door. I needed to let it out." "Take your time, Mrs. Wright," she said gently. "I'm here when you need me." April 5th, Kenneth Brooks' trial. I didn't attend. Detective Foster called to tell me the verdict: guilty on all counts of conspiracy and accessory charges. 20 years, eligible for parole in 12. I felt nothing. Kenneth Brooks had been a stranger to me before this nightmare, and he remained one. I had no tears left for him, no anger, no interest in watching him sentenced. He'd made his choices. Let the system handle the consequences. May 10th, Dr. Philip Daniels' trial. The Arizona Medical Board had already revoked his license unanimous decision announced in a brief press release 3 weeks before the trial. Dr. Philip Daniels, previously licensed to practice psychiatry in Arizona, has been found guilty of gross misconduct, fraud, and violation of patient trust. His medical license is hereby permanently revoked. I attended the trial. Not for Daniels, I felt the same detachment toward him as I did toward Kenneth, but for the families. 12 of them sat in the gallery. 12 families whose elderly loved ones had been placed at Desert Haven under false pretenses and never came home. Beatrice Stone sat beside me, her hands folded in her lap, her face lined with grief that would never fully heal. The trial lasted 3 days. Daniels pleaded not guilty, but the evidence was overwhelming. 47 fake psychiatric evaluations. $10,000 per report paid in cash or wire transfers from Marcus Brennan's accounts. Medical records so obviously fabricated that even Daniel's own expert witness couldn't defend them. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. Guilty. 47 counts of fraud. 47 counts of conspiracy to commit elder abuse. The judge sentenced him to 15 years plus $2.3 million in restitution to the victims' families. As the bailiffs led Daniels away, Beatrice turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "You got justice for my husband," she whispered. "For Marcus. For all of them. Thank you, Eleanor." She hugged me and I held her while she cried, and I realized something fundamental had shifted inside me. I wasn't just Eleanor Wright victim anymore. I was Eleanor Wright survivor, witness, advocate. May 20th, I returned to my Paradise Valley home for the first time in 5 months. Diane had kept it maintained, cleaning watering plants, collecting mail. But the moment I stepped through the front door, the house felt like a museum of betrayal. David's study where I'd found the documents. The kitchen where Jessica had smiled coldly and admitted everything. The casita where I'd hidden and learned the truth. The driveway where the black van had pulled up. Every room held ghosts. "I can't stay here," I told Diane that evening as we sat in the living room surrounded by boxes she'd packed. "I understand," Diane said. "Where will you go?" "I don't know yet. Somewhere smaller, quieter, somewhere that doesn't—" I trailed off. "Somewhere that doesn't remind you," Diane finished gently. The next day, we drove through North Scottsdale. Diane had printed real estate listings, small homes, cottages, places with gardens and privacy, and no history. We found one on a quiet cul-de-sac, a single-story Spanish-style cottage on 3 acres, adobe walls, a covered patio, a garden that had been lovingly maintained by the previous owner, now in her 90s, and moving to assisted living. "It's perfect," I said, standing in the backyard looking at the desert willows and the ocotillo and the open sky. "It's a fresh start," Diane agreed. That same week, I received a call from the National Center on Elder Abuse. "Mrs. Wright, we've been following your case. We'd like to invite you to speak at our annual conference in September. Share your story. Help educate people about the warning signs, the systems that failed, the ways survivors can fight back." I hesitated. "I'm not a public speaker." "You're a survivor," the woman said. "That's more powerful than any speech we could write." I thought about Beatrice, about the 12 families at Daniel's trial, about the 47 victims who'd trusted the wrong people. "I'll do it," I said. In June, I started writing. Not for publication, not yet, but for myself. To process, to remember, to make sense of how my son had become a stranger, and slowly an idea formed. A foundation, resources for elderly people and their families, legal aid, investigation support, education about financial abuse, medical fraud, isolation tactics, something good from something terrible. Mrs. Wright. Diane said one evening as we sat on the patio of the new cottage watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink, "You've been through hell. You've survived. You've seen justice done. What happens now?" I thought about David locked away for 25 years, about Jessica who would never see freedom again, about the hole in my heart where my son used to be. But I also thought about Beatrice, about the families who'd thanked me, about the email from the National Center on Elder Abuse, about the blank pages waiting to be filled with my story. "I survived," I said quietly. "Now I want to help others survive too." Diane smiled. "Then that's what we'll do." And for the first time in 6 months, hope flickered inside me, small, fragile, but real. On the 1st of June, I signed the deed that transferred my Paradise Valley home. The house where I'd raised David celebrated holidays and nearly lost my life to a retired couple from California. The sale price was $2.5 million. I felt lighter the moment I handed over the keys, even though 28 years of memories rode away with them. 3 days later, Diane and I moved into a small Spanish-style cottage in North Scottsdale. We'd found it during a quiet Sunday drive, cream stucco walls, terracotta, tile roof, 3 acres of desert garden dotted with saguaro and ocotillo, and a wide-covered patio that faced Camelback Mountain. The purchase price was $850,000. For the first time in months, I could breathe. Diane insisted on taking the smaller guest room. "You've given me a home," she said. "Let me give you peace in return." We planted herbs in clay pots, hung hummingbird feeders, and spent our mornings drinking coffee on the patio. The house was quiet, but it was a healing quiet, not the silence of a trap. I allocated $500,000 from the sale proceeds to start something I'd been dreaming about since the trials ended, a fund to help other families caught in the same nightmare I'd survived. July brought paperwork and purpose. With Susan Marshall's guidance, I filed articles of incorporation with the Arizona Corporation Commission. Detective Ray Foster connected me with Melissa Stone, a sharp-eyed attorney in her late 30s who specialized in elder law and agreed to serve as our legal director. Beatrice Stone, the woman I'd met at the hospital whose husband had been a Desert Haven victim, volunteered as our survivor advocate. By mid-July, the five of us, Eleanor, Susan, Ray, Melissa, and Beatrice, formed the founding board of the Eleanor Wright Foundation for Elder Justice. Our mission was straightforward: provide free legal aid to elder abuse survivors, fund investigations when law enforcement lacked resources, offer temporary safe housing, and connect families with financial counselors. On July 28th, the IRS approved our 501c3 tax-exempt status. We rented a modest 2-room office in Old Town Scottsdale, painted the walls a warm terracotta, and hung a simple wooden sign by the door. By October, we'd helped 8 Arizona families. One woman in Tucson discovered her daughter had forged a power of attorney and drained $300,000 from her savings. We connected her with Melissa, who filed for emergency guardianship and criminal charges. An elderly man in Flagstaff had been locked in his own garage by a nephew who wanted to sell the house. Susan coordinated with APS, and Ray's contacts in the Coconino County Sheriff's Office intervened within 48 hours. Every case felt personal. Every victory felt like reclaiming a piece of what I'd almost lost. In early September, I received an invitation I hadn't expected. The National Elder Abuse Prevention Conference in Washington, D.C. wanted me as their keynote speaker. My first instinct was to decline. I wasn't a professional advocate, just a woman who'd survived. But Diane squeezed my hand across the breakfast table and said, "You're exactly who they need to hear." On September 19th, I stood before an audience of 800 social workers, attorneys, law enforcement officers, APS specialists in a hotel ballroom with chandeliers that glittered like ice. My hands trembled as I gripped the microphone. I told them about Diane's warning, the black van, the fake medical records, the 3 attacks, the airport confrontation, and the 47 photos that had saved my life. I ended with a single line I'd rehearsed a dozen times. They wanted to bury me. Instead, I rose, and now I'll help others rise too. The room erupted. People stood clapping, some wiping tears. Afterward, a reporter from NPR asked for an interview. Within a week, CNN, CBS, Sunday Morning, and half a dozen regional outlets had covered the story. Donations poured in $200,000 over 3 months. We hired a full-time case manager and a legal coordinator. The foundation was no longer just an idea. It was a force. November brought expansion. We partnered with 3 Arizona law firms willing to take cases pro bono. 12 more families reached out, from Phoenix Mesa, Prescott, even a snowbird couple in Yuma, whose son-in-law had tried to sedate the husband and claim early inheritance. Melissa and her network of attorneys filed restraining orders, contested wills, and pressed criminal charges. By Thanksgiving, we'd protected over $1 million in assets and put 2 more abusers behind bars. That same month, AARP, the magazine, published a 6-page feature titled "The Mother Who Fought Back." My photo, me standing on my patio, arms crossed, jaw set, ran on the cover. Letters arrived by the dozen, some from survivors, others from families who wished they'd known help existed. Beverly Thompson, my book club friend, who'd served me tea the afternoon of the hit and run, called and asked to join the board. "You're doing what I always wanted to do," she said. "Let me help." I said yes. December arrived with a bittersweet milestone. On the 5th, Beatrice presented our 6-month report at a board meeting. 28 families assisted $1. $7 million in assets protected, 4 abusers prosecuted, and over $320,000 in donations received. Ray raised his coffee mug in a quiet toast to the woman who turned her worst day into everyone else's second chance. I smiled, but my chest felt tight, because 2 days earlier I'd received a letter from the Arizona Department of Corrections. It was addressed in unfamiliar handwriting, neat, careful, professional. Inside was a note from a prison psychologist on behalf of David. Ms. Wright, your son has made significant progress in therapy and has expressed deep remorse for his actions. He does not expect forgiveness, but he has asked if you might consider limited contact, a letter perhaps, or a brief supervised call. Please know there is no pressure. This is entirely your decision. The note was clipped to a single handwritten page from David. His penmanship was shaky, smaller than I remembered. Mother, I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I destroyed the one person who loved me unconditionally. I'm so sorry. If you never want to hear from me again, I understand. But if you ever do, I'm here, David. I'd read it 3 times, then folded it and placed it in my desk drawer. I wasn't ready to answer. Maybe I never would be. But I didn't throw it away. On December 10th, Diane Beverly and I sat around my kitchen table with mugs of peppermint tea and a yellow legal pad. We were planning the Foundation's first annual gala scheduled for December 15th, exactly 1 year, since Diane had grabbed my wrist and whispered, "Please don't go. We'll invite every family we've helped," Beverly said, jotting notes. "Donors, board members, press. Make it a celebration and a call to action." Diane looked at me. "What do you want to say?" I thought about the casita, the hospital bed, the courtroom, the podium in Washington. I thought about Beatrice, about the 800 people who'd stood and clapped, about the 28 families we'd pulled back from the edge. "I want to tell them," I said slowly, "that survival isn't the end. It's the beginning." Diane smiled. Beverly wrote it down. And for the first time in a year, I felt something close to peace. I woke on the morning of December 15th to the pale gold light of an Arizona winter spilling through the bedroom window of my small North Scottsdale cottage. For a moment, I lay still, listening to the distant call of a mourning dove and the soft rustle of wind through the ocotillo outside. 1 year ago, I had woken in terror, hiding in a casita, while 2 men unloaded a wheelchair meant for me. Today, I woke in peace. I rose, pulled on a soft cotton robe, and padded barefoot into the kitchen. Diane was already there, pouring coffee into 2 ceramic mugs. She looked up and smiled. "Good morning." "Good morning," I said, accepting the mug she handed me. We walked together onto the covered patio. The air was crisp, the sky a flawless dome of blue. The saguaro stood like sentinels across the 3 acres of desert garden we now called home. I settled into a cushioned chair. Diane sat beside me. "1 year ago," I said quietly, "you saved my life." Diane turned her mug in her hands, her eyes distant. "You gave mine meaning." We sat in silence for a long time, watching the light shift across Camelback Mountain. There was nothing more that needed to be said. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, we were standing in the grand ballroom of a Scottsdale resort surrounded by 200 guests. The room glowed with warm light from wrought iron chandeliers. Round tables draped in ivory linen filled the space, each centerpiece a small arrangement of desert wildflowers. I recognized faces from across the year, families we'd helped, attorneys who'd volunteered, donors who believed in the mission, and survivors who had found their voices again. Beatrice Stone, now 74, took the microphone first. Her voice was stronger than it had been a year ago. "My husband didn't get justice," she said, her gaze sweeping the room. "But because of the Eleanor Wright Foundation, other families will. Eleanor didn't just survive. She built a bridge for the rest of us to cross." The applause was warm and sustained. I felt my throat tighten. Melissa Stone, our legal director, stepped forward next. At 39, she carried herself with the precision of someone who had spent a career dismantling injustice. This year, she announced, the foundation assisted 47 families across Arizona. We protected $12.7 million in assets. We supported 18 criminal prosecutions, 14 of which have already resulted in convictions. More applause. I glanced at Diane, who sat at the table nearest the stage, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes bright. Then it was my turn. I climbed the 3 steps to the stage, gripped the edges of the podium, and looked out at the sea of faces. 1 year ago. I began, my voice steady. My son and his wife tried to erase me. They saw a 68-year-old woman as weak, forgettable, disposable. They drugged me, framed me, staged attacks, and planned to lock me away in a facility where I would have disappeared quietly, conveniently, permanently. I paused, let the silence settle. But I am here, and so are you. We are no longer invisible. We are no longer silent, and we will not be erased. I saw heads nodding, heard a few quiet murmurs of agreement. To every older adult who is being abused, manipulated, or dismissed, you are not alone. Your voice matters. Your life matters. And there are people who will stand with you. The room rose to its feet. The applause was deafening. I saw tears on the faces of strangers who had become friends, survivors, who had become advocates. I stepped back from the microphone, my chest tight, with something I could only describe as gratitude. At 6 o'clock, a smaller group gathered in a private dining room at the back of the resort. Diane Beverly Thompson, Susan Marshall, Officer Robert Pierce, Detective Ray Foster, and Mr. Harrison sat around a long wooden table. Plates of roasted vegetables, grilled salmon, and warm bread filled the center. We raised our glasses, water, wine, sparkling cider, and Detective Foster offered the toast. To survival, he said. To justice, to second chances. We drank, we ate, we laughed. Beverly leaned toward me halfway through the meal and said, "I've been thinking about selling my house, maybe finding something smaller, closer to you." I smiled. I'd like that. Later, when dessert had been served and the conversation had softened into quiet contentment, I stood and gestured for Diane to join me at the head of the table. She looked confused but rose and walked over. I took both her hands in mine. "Diane Collins." I said loud enough for everyone to hear, "You are no longer just my friend. You are my family. And today I am making official what has been true for months. You are the co-director of the Eleanor Wright Foundation for Elder Justice." Diane's eyes filled with tears. "I was just a housekeeper. You were never just anything," I said firmly. "You are the reason all of this exists." She pulled me into an embrace and the table erupted in applause. By 9 o'clock, I was home. The cottage was quiet. Diane had offered to stay, but I'd asked for a little time alone. I sat at my small oak desk in the corner of the living room and looked at 2 objects I had placed there earlier that morning. The first was a photograph of David at 8 years old standing beside me in the backyard of our old house in Ohio. He wore a striped t-shirt and held a baseball mitt. His smile was wide innocent, untouched by the darkness that would come. The second was the Foundation's annual report, a 40-page document bound in soft gray cardstock. 47 families, $12.7 million, 18 prosecutions. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the letter I'd been drafting for 3 weeks. It was addressed to the psychologist at the Arizona Department of Corrections who had written on David's behalf. I read it once more, then signed it. "Please tell David I received his letter. I am not ready to forgive, but I hope he finds peace, and perhaps in a few years we can speak. Mother." I folded the letter, placed it in an envelope, and set it aside to mail tomorrow. Then I reached into the bottom drawer and pulled out a small glass vial. Inside were the last 2 pills, the sedatives David had given me, the poison that had nearly stolen my mind. The police had returned them to me after the trials ended. I had kept them unsure why. Now I knew. I walked onto the patio, struck a match, and held it to the pills in a small clay dish. They caught fire, slowly releasing a thin curl of acrid smoke into the night air. I watched them burn until there was nothing left but ash. "They tried to bury me," I whispered to the stars. "Instead, I planted a garden, and from the ashes of their cruelty, I grew something beautiful, purpose, community, and hope." I stood there for a long time, the desert wind cool against my skin, the vast Arizona sky stretching endlessly above me. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. Somewhere closer, the house settled into its quiet rhythms. I turned and walked back inside, pausing at the threshold to look out one last time. I'm 69 years old, and my life is just beginning. Looking back on this family drama story, I realize how easily trust can become a weapon in the wrong hands. My own son, the boy I raised alone, the man I sacrificed everything for, saw me not as his mother, but as an obstacle between him and money. This wasn't just another family revenge stories. It was a calculated plan to erase me, orchestrated by the people who should have protected me most. Don't be like me. Don't ignore the small signs. I dismissed David's evasiveness about finances, Jessica's coldness, the strange vitamins that made me feel foggy. I told myself I was getting old, that I was imagining things. I wasn't. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Too many family drama stories end in tragedy because victims stay silent, hoping things will improve. They rarely do. The lessons I learned are these. First, elder abuse isn't always violent or loud. Sometimes it's quiet, systematic, wrapped in false concern and fake medical diagnoses. Stay vigilant. Ask questions. Keep your own records. Don't let anyone, even family, control your finances, medical care, or legal documents without transparency. Many family revenge stories begin with financial desperation, and vulnerable elders become targets. Second, you are never too old to fight back. At 68, I thought my best years were behind me. I was wrong. Survival taught me that strength isn't about age, it's about refusing to disappear. Your voice matters. Your life matters. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise. This family drama story could have ended with my silence. Instead, it became a rallying cry for justice. Third community saves lives. Diane's warning, Mr. Harrison's dash cam officer Pierce's willingness to listen. Susan Marshall's intervention, every one of them was a thread that held me together. Don't isolate. Build connections. Accept help when it's offered. No family revenge stories should ever succeed because the victim had no one to turn to. And finally, forgiveness is not weakness, but it doesn't mean reconciliation. I have not forgiven David, and I may never fully do so, but I've stopped letting hatred consume me. I've chosen purpose over bitterness. God teaches us to forgive not for the sake of those who hurt us, but to free our own hearts from the chains of anger. I'm still learning what that means. This family drama story could have ended with my death. Instead, it became a story of resurrection, not just mine, but for 47 other families who found justice because I refused to stay silent. Thank you for walking with me to the end of this journey. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if you found yourself in Eleanor's shoes, caught between family loyalty and your own survival? If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing so you won't miss upcoming videos. A gentle reminder, while inspired by real-world elder abuse cases and financial exploitation within families, certain elements have been dramatized for storytelling purposes. If this content doesn't align with your preferences, feel free to explore other videos that might suit you better.